Hey everyone, this is Deeg. Welcome to Deeg Thoughts. Here today to talk about an uncomfortable feeling that I found myself having over the weekend when watching what I thought was a bad take from a creator who I otherwise admired. And I asked myself, Greg, why do you feel this way? And I did a bunch of research and I figured out why I felt that way. And then I tried to figure out how to explain it to y'all. And today I'm going to walk through that process. And just to give it a headline, the fundamental concept is that of the unreliable narrator. And I'm going to do us all a favor by showing a video explaining what the unreliable narrator is through the context of another game I love, Skyrim. Hey, Kai. How goes? Because we have a lot of videos to get through today in order to develop my case. And the clock is ticking. So let's pull that up. Okay. What is the unreliable narrator? Fudge Muppet's about to tell us. Who is Fudge Muppet? He's the guy who does a bunch of Elder Scrolls commentary. What is Elder Scrolls? Elder Scrolls is the series that contains games like Skyrim, Morrowind, and Oblivion. Beautiful, amazing role-playing games that were the first games to formalize for me the idea of the unreliable narrator. This is just a few minutes long. We're going to let Fudge Muppet explain it. Let's go.
In many fictional universes, games, books, movies, etc., information is typically delivered in certainty, meaning that the narrator or the writer, the director, essentially whoever is leading the story, is considered to be a truth teller. They are telling the story. They possess an omniscient understanding of the world, so you may trust what they say as fact. In the Elder Scrolls, there is no glossary, no encyclopedia of facts, no codex, no omniscient understanding of all things. The narrator in this game, the book authors, the game designers, and so on, tell stories from perspective. And what do we know about perspective? It's a view of things as seen through the eyes of an individual, meaning it is subjective and contextual to their previous experiences, their bias, their understanding of the world.
Does it feel like going home, Kai? Having a creator with an Aussie accent?
This is what it means to have an unreliable narrator. The books you read when you adventure the game worlds of the Elder Scrolls are told from the perspective of in-universe characters, characters with different origins, wildly different beliefs, values, and all manner of defining features that could potentially compromise their ability to truly deliver an objective truth of the matter. Of course, you can experience what you do in the games and what you see, but even that can be received differently depending on how you interpret the information. In the
480p, let's fix that. Okay. So the idea that Fudge is talking about here, for me, one of the major moments I had that made me love Skyrim that much more was looking at the reality that Fudge is going to take us through about how there are conflicting histories of events within the world of Elder Scrolls. Conflicting histories that cannot be resolved. You cannot understand what is true. It is not possible to get a tiebreaker or cut through the knot. And so you as a person who is acting like a player in the world has to go through the process of seeing the information and deciding what you think. Is Ulfric Stormcloak just an asshole racist? Was he brainwashed? Was he put up to it? Like, if you actually read a lot of the books in Skyrim, and I think Budge is going to talk about some of these, it's kind of fascinating. But the moment that made me appreciate it that much more was when I first applied the idea of the unreliable narrator, not just to the way we ingest information in Skyrim, but to the way that we consume information outside of Skyrim, in our world. I think there's a saying in the study of the study of the philosophy of being that we exist within a story that the mind tells itself, which reflects the basic truth that we all consume reality through our senses. And our senses are just signals that are coming from our organs into our brains. And when we see, are we seeing reality or are we seeing something that our brain tells us is reality? I know, I'm not going to go too far down this rabbit hole. It's a bit much. But it points back to the idea that reality and our experience of it is fundamentally subjective. And we all have to take upon ourselves the task of parsing it for ourselves. And we owe it to ourselves to do so.
The Wisp Mothers, you may just see an angry ghost, but to another it may look like the forlorn soul of a snow elf bound to this world by curse or unfinished business. Even if you look for it, there is no definitive answer. The gorgeous beauty of this type of storytelling to me is that it creates immense mystery and deepens every aspect of the world. And to take that
and mirrors our own world. It's adding that. Kai, you forgot to plug your Skyrim book reading series. Oh man, I so want to come back to that idea someday. I don't know when it's going to happen, but it's an idea that I'm still quite fond of. Someday.
Further, I would even argue that the unreliable narrator allows the player to exercise critical thinking and make a self-informed decision about what they are experiencing, rather than having informational, indisputable truth blasted into their mind's eye. The unreliable narrator creates a more tantalizing experience because even the simplest exposition of infodump must be held under a scrutinous eye. It furthers the mystery, it deepens the world. There is always more to discover. I think it'd be helpful if we looked at some examples. In the most recent entry of the mainline Elder Scrolls series, the Elder Scrolls V Skyrim, the premise of the Civil War is that Ulfric Stormcloak killed the High King and is trying to defeat the Empire. So using deduction, we can assume that High King Torrig is dead. Everyone agrees on that, and we can see him in Sovngarde. Ulfric claims he killed him, everyone else claimed Ulfric killed him. We can all agree that Ulfric killed the king. But the mystery is in the details. Why and how did Ulfric kill him? Imperials and Empire supporters tend to say that Ulfric rode up into the Blue Palace and used his mighty thumb to shout the High King into many pieces. Others say he shouted Torrig to the ground and stuck him with his sword. Either way, these actions would classify as unjust, as murder. Whereas among Ulfric, the Stormcloaks and various individuals such as Rogvir, the man who opened the gate for his escape, claim that Ulfric lawfully challenged Torrig to a duel, as is ancient custom of Skyrim. The beauty of this is that there is no 100% confirmed answer. We can use deduction and perhaps come up with more likely scenarios. Some people may have had better first-hand accounts, but then again, even if there was a legal duel, they don't want to further support Ulfric's claim, so why would they tell the truth? The idea of a traditional Nordic battle for the throne versus that of murder makes the Civil War and Ulfric a far more compelling conflict and character. Why?
Agreed. I'm just going to add in a little moment from last week's discussion too, is that when there's no indisputable version of truth, one we often pursue is the one that we're incentivized to pursue. This is good shit. And how many debates have you seen online about whether Stormcloaks or Imperials are more justified in their side of the conflict? How many debates? How interesting of an exploration that actually is. I'm not going to go into it. Maybe Fudge will, but it is a very exciting part of the game that I continue to love.
Why? Because we don't know the truth. We can't be certain. I can play a character who believes in Ulfric as a just and honorable hero, or I can play a character who believes him to be an egomaniacal murderer. Via the unreliable narrator, both points of view are valid without the presence of concrete omniscient evidence. But let's go back a little further to Morrowind, the game that really doubled down on this idea of an unreliable narrator. The infamous Battle of Red Mountain has many different tales about how it went down, and ultimately there is no definitive answer. What's even more interesting is that from a design perspective, people who worked on Morrowind actually said that there was no in-house agreed upon non-canon series of events. It is left entirely to the viewer, reader, or player to use their critical thinking and come to their own conclusions. There is a version where the Tribunal ascend and gain divinity by just being so amazing. There's a version where they claimed godly power from the heart of Lorkhan despite Azura's warnings. There's a version where Nerevar fell in battle, and another where the Tribunal committed foul murder and ritualistically killed their general. There is a version where Dagoth went to the Nords and told them where to find their dead god's heart, where they did battle against Nerevar. There is a version where a Sench Khajiit is used as a battle mount. There are many conflicting accounts and retellings of this legendary event that happened thousands of years ago.
Khajiit as battle mounts? I didn't know that one. Wow.
Maybe they are all wrong, maybe they're all right, and when we get into some of the metaphysical bits and pieces of the universe later, we can talk about how these contradictory events could all be true in a more literal sense. But before that, I really want to finish off with some closing remarks about the Unreliable Narrator. The push for the Unreliable Narrator is the push for myth. The Elder Scrolls is very aware of the myth versus the mundane. When you explain information in an omniscient codex of fact, it may be cool, but it becomes...
I think we don't need to watch the rest of this section, actually. Because here he's talking about whether to choose to create an unreliable narrator or whether not to choose to create it. But in the real world, we don't get to choose whether people are unreliable narrators. All we get to do is choose our response to them. So, great explanation from Fudge Muppet. Always love revisiting the Elder Scrolls. Animal abuse. Kai, let me think about that. So, Khajiit are conscious. So if they're serving as battle mounts, they're doing so voluntarily. I think. I guess you could enslave them. And then maybe it's slavery, even worse. Even worse crime. Not sure. But this is the idea of the unreliable narrator, and my contention is, again, that it's not just something you see in well-crafted games with good myth. It's something that you see in the real world, every day, everywhere. Tune into a left-leaning news report and turn into a right-leaning news report of the same thing. That's exactly what you see. You see people who are unreliably narrating events, and even people who are doing so in good faith and doing their best to resist the personal short-term incentives of saying the thing that gives them the most credit or acclaim or money return, still are limited by the bounds of their understanding, competence, and their knowledge. And so when we see two people disagree, we don't always get the chance to know the truth. And when that happens, we still have to form a useful model of what the truth could be. And that's what this is about. So, what was the video that got me on going down this path? Actually, before I show you the video that got me down this path, I'm going to show you the video that this video is reacting to. I know, I'm sorry. If you stick with me, this is going to make sense. And I think people will enjoy it. So here we go. All right, what is this? This is a Doom Eternal review by Skill Up. Who's Skill Up? Skill Up's a professional video game reviewer on YouTube whose content I adore. I freaking adore Skill Up. I think that Skill Up has the best writing in all of video game journalism right now. You can take your Jason Schreiers with his investigative approach and does really hard-hitting, incredibly important work that is so highly valued that I literally pay for a newspaper subscription just to read his work. You can take the Danny O'Dwyer as a documentarian, also really has a way with words and is great at pulling out important things from people that need to be heard. But neither of those guys or anyone else I've ever seen in the YouTube space holds a candle to Skill Up with his writing. I'm debating whether or not I'm going to show y'all a snippet of why I love their writing and what I love about their content. I'm not sure if I need to. Maybe you can just take my word for it that I love these guys. I hope you can. A celebrity crush. I do have a crush on Skill Up. He's also an attractive man with a nice voice. I mean, listen, how could you not have a crush on this guy? But this is a Doom Eternal review, and I'm skipping the first 14 minutes, and I'm going to briefly summarize what he says there. Basically, he loved Doom. He loved Doom 2016. The power fantasy felt amazing. The shotgun, the glory kills, the gore, and the outright push forward combat, unrelenting, go, go, go. He loved it. It felt amazing to him. Doom Eternal, he feels a little more mixed about. Doom Eternal, he's like, yeah, more Doom is amazing. And I like that it's pushing me to play the game in ways that are more fun. But there are things about it I don't like the platforming. He is like meh on. What else is he meh on? The UI, I was meh on the UI. A few other things I'm not naming or remembering correctly. But I'm skipping to a specific critique he has about a game that he loves, but some part of it that really stuck in his craw. And it's the Marauder.
You know what I hope doesn't stay intact? These fucking guys.
Main laboratory.
So just as much as I can't put into words how much I love the meat hook, I also can't put into words just how much I hate Marauders. They are the only...
Another Australian? You're right! I forgot Skill Up is Aussie. I don't think... The next guy, I don't think he's Aussie. I don't think so. You can tell me, but I don't think he is. So we're going to break our streak. Sorry, continue Skill Up.
Objectively terrible thing in the entire Doom franchise at this point. If I ever had the chance to interview Marty and Hugo again, the first question I would ask is, what the hell were you thinking with these Marauders? Okay, so let me explain. Marauders are an enemy that you meet about halfway through the game, and they pop up after that at random intervals. Most enemies in this game have one or two features baked into their kit, like the Arachnotrons, which can shoot you from afar with a turret, or they can melee you up close, and that's about it. The Marauders have a shotgun that they use if you get too close. They have a ranged attack that they use if you get too far away. They have a melee swing that they can bust out whenever the fuck they like. They have a massive gap closer. They run faster than A-Train. They summon a flaming dog that chases you if you don't engage them enough. Oh, and they are essentially invulnerable to most attacks because they can bring up their shield in a split second that will block hit scan attacks. You're meant to wait for this tiny opening when their eyes turn green and they're open to attack, and you can really only trigger that if you're standing at a precise distance from them. Oh, and they're actually the one enemy in the game that the BFG does nothing against. So yeah, that's a lot in that kit. That's a lot of stuff. There are lore reasons for this. They're meant to be really powerful, so I'm fine with that idea. There's a lot of people in the comments that are like, oh, just get good and shoot rockets to their feet and... No, it's not about them being hard. This is a hard game. I love that it's hard. I love getting my ass handed to me repeatedly in Doom. The problem isn't that Marauders are hard. The problem is they're bad. They're completely antithetical to the core design philosophy that underpinned Doom's entire combat design. Id had famously likened Doom 2016 combat to chess, where every piece on the board has a specific moveset and they combine these pieces in interesting ways. With this model...
That was Danny O'Dwyer, by the way. He's the guy, the documentarian I was laying praise on earlier.
The player could eventually come to instinctively feel combat and move through it with a kind of graceful carnage. The Marauders completely arrest this flow. They demand your attention in a way that no other enemy does. The chess game is essentially put on hold until you deal with this asshole. More likely though, you'll do what I did, which is just run around ignoring them until everything else is dead, and then just 1v1 them while you slowly whittle down their health. It's so boring. And separate from their design intent, they just aren't well implemented. Like, they just feel so janky. The ideal distance that you're meant to be from them just feels so inconsistent. No other enemy in this game feels remotely janky, but the Marauders just feel like the contextual moveset is not consistent or reliable. They're not hard. Okay, they're a little bit hard. It's not that they're hard, they're boring. You could delete these enemies from the game and Doom Eternal immediately becomes a better video game. That's all I'll say on the matter. There are others.
Okay. That's all I'll say on the matter. So, to summarize, Skill Up loved the shit out of Doom. You saw there's a shot of him actually sitting in a car with Hugo Martin and... I can't think of their dude's name. Longtime id guy. It's going to come to me later, I'm sure. Anyway, in a car and talking about Doom 2016, like he loved that game and he liked this as an iteration, but there's some parts of the iteration he could have done without, including the Marauder. So I'm like, okay, this is cool. And I saw this before I played the game. Okay. I did play Doom Eternal. But I'm going to get back to that in just a minute. Before I talk about my experience with the game, let's share the impression of another creator who I really admire. And his name is poetically stated. It is...
I love the...
It is Under the Mayo. A man who became known to me for this video, which has almost 700,000 views on YouTube. Crazy. And the title of the video is Doom Eternal responding to Skill Up and Upper Echelon and many others on the Marauder. Let's see what he has to say. This is going to be a retort.
The Marauder. Doom Eternal is a better game with his inclusion. He's fast, he hits hard, and he doesn't follow the rules of the rest of the enemies in the game, and that's exactly why I love him. That last point seems to be the issue that people have with him, but half of what you're hearing is completely false, and the other half is easily resolved by intelligent play and learning the game. Let's listen to the criticism about this character from several channels that I regularly view and who produce a lot of content that I enjoy, and we're going to dissect and debunk left and right. So, who is the Marauder? Gentlemen?
They are the only objectively terrible thing in the entire Doom franchise at this point. The Marauders have a shotgun that they use if you get too close. They have a ranged attack that they use if you get too far away. They have a melee swing that they can bust out whenever the fuck they like. They have a massive gap closer. They run faster than A-Train. They summon a flaming dog that chases you if you don't engage them enough. Oh, and they are essentially invulnerable to most attacks because they can bring up their shield in a split second that will block hit scan attacks.
First of all, the statement that his dog spawns if you don't engage him enough is a flat out lie. His dog only spawns if he's blocking fire with his shield. You can run around for days and the dog will never spawn if you don't hit his shield. The dog is your punishment for wasting your ammo, though he will occasionally spawn the dog if he blocks fire from another enemy.
These Marauders are also insanely fast, deal a ton of damage, and have a boatload of health. All of it combines to make an encounter that just sucks.
This is a problem. The Marauder, it is an enemy type in this game that completely contradicts every single thing this game encourages you to do. Like I mentioned before, it's all about fast movement, learning the layout of the arenas, finding ways to traverse it quickly and kill enemies quickly.
The problem isn't that Marauders are hard, the problem is they're bad. They're completely antithetical to the core design philosophy that underpinned Doom's entire combat design.
Okay, so here's the point about the Marauder contradicting the flow of Doom Eternal. You just heard that the game is about fast movement, learning the layout of the arenas, fast traversal, and fast killing. So when you're fighting the Marauder, you have to quickly dodge his projectiles, react to the dog spawn and take it out quickly, understand the level so while you're guarding against him you don't get lost or cornered, and strategically navigate to vantage points and sources of health and ammo. So right there you have movement, layout, traversal, and fast killing all involved in a fight against the Marauder. Moving on.
You cannot shoot this guy, no matter how far away he is, if he's running, because if he's running, he'll just dodge the bullets instantly.
The horrible part is that they also have a completely invulnerable red shield that they can pull out in a split second whenever they want.
This upper echelon footage is fucking rough, man. Oh my god. It's always painful watching someone talk about the game and you see them play and it's like, oh god, are you sure you should be talking about this?
Which effectively makes you waste what little ammo you have left.
It's not whenever they want. Yes, you'll learn quickly that if you shoot at him normally, he'll block you. But saying he pulls it out whenever he wants is trying to give the impression that
he pulls it out whenever he wants. Oh yeah.
The enemy is impossible to manage, which is crap. He very obviously blocks attacks that come from the front. He does not block everything. You can shoot rockets to his side and detonate them behind him. Same with grenades. You can sticky bomb his feet, so don't complain about wasting ammo when that's your fault, not his. Some guns clearly don't work on him, so if you run out of ammo by emptying your clip into his shield, that's on you.
You're meant to wait for this tiny opening when their eyes turn green and they're open to attack, and you can really only trigger that if you're standing at a precise distance from them.
You can't just shoot them.
At least Skill Up can aim. Like we can see that in the footage.
Bullets deflect off of him. If you're too close, he's going to shotgun blast you. If you're too far, he's going to throw an axe at you. You have to stand in this Goldilocks zone where his eyes blink and then he swings an axe at you. That's when you can shoot him.
This is incredibly misleading. You are not supposed to stand at a certain range. You back off from him to where he can only attack long range, then he will start running at you, and you need to be prepared to tag him out of his melee attack. The best tools for this are the ballista or the super shotgun. Then he's staggered, you close the gap, and you blast him in the face again for free. Do not try to stand in a sweet spot. It's not hard to figure out that you can stay back and bait him into running at you.
Oh, and they're actually the one enemy in the game that the BFG does nothing against.
He's immune to the BFG, which is complete and utter horseshit.
He is not immune to the BFG. You can shoot it over his head, which forces him to turn around, exposing his back for an attack if you want to play.
What a great fucking video this is. Oh my god. Like calling out reviewers like this, boom, boom, boom. It gets your like your blood up listening to this. Fuck. Sorry. Go on, man.
Play it that way.
But the problem I found with this guy is that he doesn't always follow his own rules. The game says that the Marauder only uses his shotgun if you're at close range, and he'll throw his axe if you're far away, but that difference between what the game determines as shotgun range or axe throwing range isn't really all that clear. It's just a bit of an unbalanced stain on a really solid enemy lineup otherwise.
The ideal distance that you're meant to be from them just feels so
Another
inconsistent. No other enemy in this game feels remotely janky, but the Marauders just feel like the contextual moveset is not consistent or reliable.
I don't know how much clearer it could get. The Marauder is like fighting a demonic version of yourself. He moves around with your dash speed, he has your super shotgun, so what's your shotgun range? Well, that's basically his too. Stay out of it. If he's closing the gap and the fight isn't in your favor, double dash away or use your meat hook.
I know some contrarian edgelords in the comment section will be like, well, you just need to do this and that and the other thing and blah blah, get good, scrub. Well, sure, whatever. But for the average player tackling this game, especially on ultra violence difficulty, these Marauders can just totally kill your pacing, your enjoyment, and your overall experience.
This is the most bizarre argument of the bunch. Let's hear that again.
But for the average player tackling this game, especially on ultra violence difficulty, these Marauders can just totally kill your pacing, your enjoyment, and your overall experience.
Why on earth would an average player be playing on ultra violence and then complain about difficulty? The game has a menu that allows you to lower the difficulty at any time, and ultra violence is for experienced players who want a tough challenge, so this is just so weird to me. He's also completely dismissing all of the tactics for dealing with the fight, and insulting anyone who even bothers to suggest approaching the fight differently. Who does that? Look at how he's playing against the Marauder too. He's staying right in his face, not trying to bait out his run, blowing himself up with the rocket launcher. He barely ever dashes, no meat hook to move around, and we're supposed to take his complaints seriously?
And he doesn't. Mayo doesn't even say once. And he can't aim for shit. He just shows us. That is poetic. Of course, I'm spelling it out. Rel, average player, ultra violence. Exactly. Exactly. He deserves ultra violence. Is he playing with a controller? I mean, it must be. I don't know how you can move like that with a mouse unless you have like an arm mobility issue. It's got to be a controller. Okay, this video continues to be good. Let's let it roll.
I mean, I get it. On my first playthrough, I handled the Marauders poorly too. They made me rethink my battle plan, and they made me a better player as a result. It wasn't till my second playthrough that I really started to get it, but I didn't go out into the streets screaming about how unfair it all is.
The Marauders completely arrest this flow. They demand your attention in a way that no other enemy does. The chess game is essentially put on hold until you deal with this asshole.
I do not see how this is a negative. Quote, "They demand your attention in a way that no other enemy does." Have these people played Doom 2 or Final Doom? Did they ever encounter the Archvile in those games? In the original games, the style was very run and gun, circle strafing and blasting your enemies. You could fight everyone like this pretty much, except the Archvile. If he made eye contact with you from anywhere on the screen, he started burning you and you would explode and die in 2 seconds. You had to run and hide to escape his attack. You had to play the game very differently to take him down.
I hated those assholes.
You could say he ruined the fun.
I remember
But I
that.
never saw it that way. Sure, he was frustrating when he appeared. He caused legendary amounts of rage when the game came out. And you either had to avoid him and take everyone else out, risking he sneaks up on you, or you took him on right away to eliminate the threat. Sounds a lot like the Marauder.
I think it's also easier to sneak in things like that when there's no Reddit or YouTube or Twitch, like back in the days when Doom and Doom 2 were released. Bit of a different feedback environment. But an interesting comparison.
But let me ask all of you old Doom fans, didn't you get excited when you saw the return of the Archvile? And if you did, why? Wasn't it because he's a huge bastard that used to cause you to rage due to his cheapness? And you were thrilled to see him back because you wanted to feel that rage again because it makes you so much more excited when you finally take him down. That's why the Marauder is great.
You know, I hope he gets nerfed at least. You know, that would be great.
You could delete these enemies from the game and Doom Eternal immediately becomes a better video game.
Do not call for nerfs in the first week of a game. Take this from someone who plays fighting games. This reminds me a lot of another character that people complained about in one of my favorite games, Mortal Kombat 9, Shao Kahn. When you get to Shao Kahn at the end of the story mode, he is brutal. He pounds you into the ground. He has a fast as lightning shoulder charge that stuns you. He has an unblockable hammer that can loop. He hits hard and he's super fast. He's there to destroy you. He seems totally unfair and way too hard to beat, especially playing on a high difficulty level. Until you learn the game. When you understand your movesets, how to do combos, footsie range, how to actually play the game and how the AI works against you, then he completely falls apart and becomes laughably easy. So yeah, don't ask to nerf enemies before you get a chance to play the game more. Otherwise, you're gonna seriously affect the fans that love to replay the game and get better. I think the Marauders are incredibly fun to fight because they reward smart, fast, reactive play. Here's some footage of me fighting Marauders and having a great time doing it.
Oh, interesting. So the Marauder took friendly fire, which triggered the dog spawn. That is kind of interesting.
So don't believe what people are saying about this enemy. If you're having trouble with him yourself, try to think about it in a different way. Find a way to have fun with it. I did. And if you want to run up with everything with a super shotgun point blank range with as much ammo as you want, go play Doom 2016, a game that I love and I've played 750 hours of in the single player mode only. But we all knew that we were signing up for something more strategic with this game. It plays more like Quake 3 than it does an old school Doom game, and I don't think that's a bad thing. And we shouldn't be complaining that we got a pain in the ass enemy that beats us down if we can't remain cool. It makes us better. It's really cool, and it's really Doom. Like, subscribe, bye. Oh, and this isn't supposed to be a call out of anyone. All these channels I mentioned, I watch constantly. Love Layman, love Griffin. Your stuff is great. I know that I'm a nobody here, but I felt like I had to make this video because I will be so pissed off if they actually change the Marauder.
There it is. That is a beautifully stated video. Couple things. So, he said that we all understood this was going to be different. I don't know if that's fair. I don't know if it's fair to say that everyone who played Doom 2016 should have expected Doom Eternal to have been this different, more challenging game that forced players into accountability for understanding the game systems. Well, I haven't played the new one yet, but based on this, seems like the main issue is the game implicitly promises predictable opponents with easily learnable movesets up until this point, until the end the Marauder breaks it. Yeah, and that's one of the things I was thinking about too, Rel, is you could perhaps rephrase this not as a enemy design problem, but as a pacing problem. Maybe the way that the mechanics that the Marauder uses are not transparent enough to the player. I think that most of the other enemies in the game have one or two things about them you need to know, and the Marauder just clearly has layers of things, which makes it different. So this could just be a presentation training issue. Either way, to me, I found when I watched this video, one of the main payloads I came away with was, Skill Up, who's a guy whose takes I really like and who's really influenced the games I've played in the last few years, was wrong about this. Like, this guy convinced me under the Mayo, and this is the first time I saw his content, convinced me that Skill Up was just wrong about this. And like, that's okay. Like, it's okay to get stuff wrong. I fully believe in the world of people who are right about some things and wrong about others, and we all just try to learn and improve over time. Yours truly included, by the way. Now, my experience playing Doom. So let's talk about why this is an unreliable narrator moment, at least for me. The idea of the unreliable narrator applies when you yourself cannot go out there and get the truth. For example, let's say you're reading conflicting accounts of an event which happened 1,000 years ago, and there's no primary source material. Well, you have to try to synthesize what you believe actually happened by combining the two accounts. How do you do that? Well, we're going to get there. In this case, I could just play Doom Eternal. Like, I could. I started a nightmare run when this game came out with some of my buddies, and I got through like a third of the game before I ran out of steam. And the reason why is pretty simple. I just don't care for single-player games whose core are about challenge and mastery. The same reasons I pass up a lot of other games. If you're gonna push me to get good at something, I'm only really gonna care if it's a multiplayer context of some kind. A game like an MMO, an MMO shooter like PlanetSide, games like this are the games where the accountability of mastery over the systems is worth the effort. So Doom, not for me in that way. And I've toyed with the idea of going back and playing the game on a lower difficulty mode. I still want to do that, but who knows when I'm going to make the time for that, man. Who fucking knows? If I could print out time, Doom Eternal would be something that I've already played and formed my own opinion about. So, in this world, where I have my priorities, and it's important to me to pursue the things that are the most important to me, Doom Eternal is not, and having a take on the Marauder is not something that I myself can have. So why should I care about the truth of the Marauder? Well, for me, there are a couple dimensions to it. Number one, I like both these guys' content, and they disagree. I would like to understand better why they disagree so I can enjoy their content more effectively. Number two is I think they both have interesting points to make. And I think there's probably truth underneath what they say that has the potential to unlock a greater understanding of some kind. But anyway, this is a great video. It didn't make me that uncomfortable to watch it. And Doom Eternal's a great game. And by the way, while we're talking about Doom, if you ever get the chance, I highly recommend watching the Doom Eternal interviews done by Danny O'Dwyer on the No Clip channel. Fantastic interviews about how games get made. Hugo Martin in general has put a lot of content out there, talking about how he decided, or how his studio decided to make Doom and Doom Eternal. And it's all fascinating shit. Kai, I feel that. PvE games are always designed to be beaten. PvP can theoretically never be beaten. Yeah. Or perhaps in PvP, what's required to beat it changes with the people who are playing it. Yeah. So that's all I'm going to say about Doom for now. But we're not done here, because the conflict between these two creators, again, skill up, the writing wunderkind Aussie, and under the Mayo, the straight up, hard-hitting Doom apologist. These guys also disagreed on another game that I also won't play, which is Outriders. And this actually tripped me up this weekend. This actually triggered me a little bit. So let's see how I want to do this. What's the proper order? Thinking. Yeah, okay, let's go into the thing that triggered me. Let's roll with the narrative. And one of my big triggers is when I feel like someone is misrepresenting an opposing viewpoint by simplifying it and tearing it down, when they're making a straw man out of something that they're disagreeing with. I really hate when I feel like people are doing that. And I felt like I was watching that in this video. And it upset me to the point where I even wrote a YouTube comment, which I'll show you after the video. Here we go. Enough preamble. This is Under the Mayo's Outriders review. Same guy who we just heard from on the Marauders.
This is only the demo. Do you realize this is a demo? This is a f***ing demo. Me so mad I make review on demo. I bet you play Fortnite. It's a demo, not the full game. There will be lots of changes on the main game. Bro, you only played the demo. It's a demo, bro. Stop getting your panties wet. Imagine forming your entire opinion on a demo. It's a demo! Apparently, a lot of people think that a demo that releases a month before the game comes out is not representative of the full game experience. They think that a demo is some kind of work in progress and the final product is going to be much better. That's not how it works. A demo is not a beta. A demo is a playable slice of the finished game. Outriders was a mess as a demo, and it's a mess as a released game. We're going to talk about why this game is so bad. You said it would get better beyond the demo, and here I am 20 hours into the game and it has been a miserable experience. And it's not because I'm not a fan of looter shooters or cover shooters. I respect the Gears of War franchise even though it's not for me. I played Borderlands a bunch. I think Destiny 2 has some fun combat and movement even if, again, it's not for me. I'm not going to call a game bad just because it's not for me. I'm going to call it bad because it's really bad. First of all, any game that...
So first off, making an enemy of your audience. Trigger 1. This bothers me. I'm not really sure why it bothers me, but it bothers me. It seems like rather than formulate an opinion that is worthwhile and says something big or deep or interesting, he's just arguing. Starting off a video like this in an argumentative tone for me is just a turn off. especially because I wasn't part of the conversation before this.
Requires you to connect to its servers just to play the single player mode gets an F in my book, right off the bat. Outriders launch was marred by server issues the following days that caused players not to be able to play it. Even though you can play solo, you were not allowed to play. So the developers of
hyperbole. So saying that because the game requires a connection, it's an instant F. Like, clearly it's not an instant F because this video has another 18 minutes of content in it. What else is there to say if you've already failed it? Say what you mean.
Of this game considered the fact that server problems can happen and that plenty of people live in parts of the world that have unstable or poor internet service, and they said, screw them, you connect online or you don't play, period. I have no tolerance for this, and it needs to be changed.
I agree, by the way. If it's a single player game, let people play it offline. Just to get that out of the way.
Before putting together this review, I decided to take a break from team play and just hop in and play some single player for a while. I came up on this battle here which took me several attempts because it was pretty challenging. I finally got the hang of it. I was using my powers appropriately, was using cover when I needed to. I took down the elite bad guy and picked up the key to the door. It took me about 30 minutes, which is fine. I don't mind repeating a battle until I get it. And I felt good, like finally I took out everyone and we're gonna go through this door. And then the server disconnected and I was booted from the game and I lost all my progress on the quest. This is unacceptable.
There are even worse bugs than this, by the way. I've been reading that if you do any kind of matchmaking in Outriders right now, or at least as of a few days ago, maybe this could be fixed today, that there was a bug that could cause you to lose every single item on your character permanently. Oh, God, it's just painful to think about that. Can you imagine?
Prologue to Outriders is abysmal, and I know the prologue isn't the whole game, but it is the first hour of the game, and it's unacceptable for the first hour to be this bad. It's filled with horrible modern gaming tropes of forced walking sections, constant cutscene interruptions, and brain-dead, laughably easy tutorials. For as much as I hear about Outriders not being a cover shooter, and everyone just parroting the corporate tagline of "the cover is for the enemies," Outriders gameplay still relies.
Is that a corporate tagline? Let's test this. Let's see if this is actually being said by People Can Fly. Outriders, the cover is for the enemy. Let's see. People are saying this on various gaming news sites. This is Polygon. Oh, that's a great splash image. Okay. This came out on April 6th, just under a week ago. Maybe this is the smoking gun here. Let's save my eyeballs. Boom. Okay. So they didn't say in those exact words, but this was communicated by People Can Fly. Right here on the publisher Square Enix's website, March 15th, by Bartek Kamita. So this isn't like a corporate tagline. This is like a tagline created by the community or by journalists. But these articles were published since the game was released, not back in the middle of March when people were consuming the demo. Again, also since the release. Yeah, I'm not sure that's a fair statement. So, look, Under the Mayo made a video pulling apart the individual claims of these people who got the Marauder wrong. So hopefully he doesn't mind a little bit of return in kind.
a lot on the cover system, and it introduces its gameplay through a cover tutorial. If you're not supposed to treat this as a cover shooter, why is the game presenting its combat tutorial through the cover system? If this isn't a cover shooter, then the game is doing a terrible job at showing what kind of game it's going to be. It would be like if you had a stealth game where the first 2 levels were running around out in the open shooting everyone with a shotgun. You don't want to mislead your players as they're trying to learn how your game works.
Ain't the new player experience a bitch?
People act like you're supposed to just be running around wildly out in the open in this game, and that only the enemies will be using cover. Yeah, good luck with that. This game spawns in so many units that constantly spray fire at you and snipe you the moment you expose yourself. You're gonna get shredded by gunfire if you don't use the cover system by world tier 5 or 6. Most people are not going to be able to just ignore the cover system when they're taking this much damage, especially if they spend time in single player where 20 guys will shoot you the moment you're exposed. I do appreciate that.
And speaking of single player, Consuted just said, I wonder how many people bought into the game because they decided to market it as a not a live service game. Yeah. I think that the whole sting of not being able to play offline would have been significantly softer if, number one, if the servers worked on launch, and number two, if they didn't market the game as not being live services. Like, I think everyone can agree just how egregious that reality is. I totally do. Good point. Continuing.
Not the entire game is focused on cover shooting. In many encounters, you can spend a lot of time in open space, rushing in to use your powers, and the cover system becomes important when you're facing a lot of enemies who are really deadly. That's good. I'll take that over a game that's 100% cover focused. So Outriders at least has that going for it. When the AI is so dumb that you're allowed to run about more freely, the cover system can be forgotten. But that turns the game into basically 2 different kinds of encounters. Ones where you're being sniped from every angle and you need to regularly take cover, and ones where you're standing out in the open shooting hordes of low health idiots or tanky bosses while constantly healing yourself. In between each of the awful gameplay sections are cutscenes filled with boring characters voiced with boring dialogue and boring performances. None more boring.
So many just pejorative adjectives. Just like peppering them in there. Awful, boring, terrible.
Boring than your own character, who is either as lifeless as
Okay. So as long as we're talking about things that are triggering, like, that's another thing that I find when I hear people speaking in that way and constantly reusing the same adjectives like boring, boring, boring. Number one, I get the sense that the person is speaking emotionally and not from a point of consideration, which to me suggests that they maybe should be ignored. And number two, if that's not the case, an alternative could be that they're trying to manipulate me into believing the game is boring by saying the word boring 500 times. It's a rhetorical tactic to repeat yourself that way. And I don't like it.
Henry from Silent Hill 4, or as obnoxious as V from Cyberpunk. Cutscenes are always interrupting the game.
Agree, though, that V is obnoxious.
I've never seen a game with this many cutscenes. Cutscenes into loading screens, into more cutscenes, cutscenes of opening a door which go into loading screens. And I don't really know where else to mention this, so I'll just say it here. The music, it might as well not even be there. It's so bland and forgettable that I regularly forgot there was music playing. A lot of the time it just feels like a loop of dun, dun 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 dun, 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 dun 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 dun, dun. The camera problems I mentioned in my demo video are still persistent and lead to many moments of frustration. When you get anywhere close to a wall, the camera can't handle it. Your character completely disappears from your vision, and aiming becomes disorienting. If you end up in a tight space during combat, the camera becomes very problematic. The game only allows a max field of view of 90, which is ridiculous, especially in a game where enemies do their best to surround you and shoot from all around. You just don't have any peripheral vision here. And the worst part of it all is that when you aim your gun, the camera zooms in on your character so close that you lose all perspective of the battlefield. This isn't Dead Space. We don't need to be this close to our character when shooting. The combat can get so frantic in this game that cutting off this much of your vision just to aim your gun is horribly detrimental to the experience. In many cases, you lose your view of the ground, where enemies are regularly tossing explosives. You lose that important visual information you need to react to. You can see it on full display in this boss fight, where every time I aim at him, I can't see the ground anymore, in a fight that has constant damage and hazards on the ground. The animation issues in the demo are still here. Reloading your gun puts your character through awkward, unnaturally smooth motions. Taking cover and getting out of cover feels unresponsive sometimes. You can't jump at all. You have to vault over things or take cover behind something and then vault over. And these limitations can cause some real frustrating moments when you're just trying to get up over this tiny ledge and you can't. Oh my god. Outright.
Oh god, that is so painful to watch. Like, I don't know if you guys have this like, I have like a material or a touch sensitivity. For me, when I was a kid, the sensation of touching corduroy made me physically like seize up. Like, the sensation is so disturbing. And not in a way I can explain. It's just my body hates it. And I get that same feeling watching him trying to roll up that ledge. Oh god. Terrible feeling. Bullseye, dude buried the game. He did. Okay, and I didn't say this at the start, but part of the reason I've been mostly complaining about Under the Mayo's take on this. But part of the reason I was so fascinated by this video is because he's the only creator I see dumping on this game. And maybe this is just a confirmation bias problem with the YouTube algorithm where most people I watch, people who are inclined to like this kind of game. I don't know. But the consensus is it's too buggy to enjoy, but if you can get past, but if there were no bugs, it would be amazing. Or it would at least be a meaningful iteration on a genre desperately in need of iteration. But this guy is saying it sucks. It's bad. It's dumb. Why would you bother? And that fascinates me. And that fact is worth exploring. Speaking of, we have another, I think, 8 minutes we're going to explore of this video. So let's keep it rolling.
Outriders' main attraction is the ability system and how it plays into the loot system. There are some cool abilities and lots of things to consider when equipping a new weapon or piece of gear. It's not just about more armor or more life or firepower. Something might have lower stats, but it provides a perk to a special ability that you like to use, which elevates the gear system to something a bit more interesting. But while the abilities themselves are mostly pretty cool visually, they don't feel very good to use. It just feels like you hit the button and watch a basic, unremarkable animation. I tried to play with the Devastator class, but once I got to level 15, I had gotten so bored of his powers that I went back to my level 7 Pyromancer from the demo and worked my way back up. After unlocking more powers with him, I found a good mix of abilities that worked for my playstyle, but I don't actually find myself enjoying them or feeling powerful. The combat is the worst part of the whole thing. The guns feel wimpy, with barely any feedback, and really sad sound effects. There's more to how a gun is supposed to feel beyond just how quickly it kills an enemy. The only ones that have any sense of impact are a few of the shotguns. Enemies spawn in, just appearing out of thin air, in front of you, behind you, dropping your health to nothing in mere seconds. And if you die, you can resurrect yourself one time, and after that, one of your partners has to get you up. But you better cross your fingers and hope you don't get the awful resurrect bug that tells your partner effect resisted and makes it impossible to resurrect you. And now your last man is running around facing the fight alone, as his two partners sit on the ground unable to be resurrected. Just sitting there, staring at the screen, listening to the annoying heartbeat sound. The game doesn't even let you slowly crawl to a safer place in case you actually can be resurrected. The game does have its moments, where things come together and you go, wow, that was awesome. For me, it's with Pyromancer using the thermal bomb ability. I can burn someone at a distance, and when they die, they float in the air and explode, turning everyone around them into blood and gore. And it's cool, but aside from these moments, you're just shooting the same old boring rifles and submachine guns that you've seen and have been done better in 1,000 other games. All side quests are basically the same: run into a big area with a bunch of cover and mow down an army of dumbasses. A few heavy bullet sponges will come at you, then you get to the end. In 20 hours of gameplay, I haven't seen anything like
an army of dumbasses. So poetically put.
Like, take something to a place and connect it and defend this area for 2 minutes. It's all just the most basic missions ever. I even had a side quest where I talked to one guy, walked across the camp to talk to another guy, and walked back to the first guy, and I completed the side quest and got a new gun. For that. Boss battles are hilariously bad. Nothing more than run around emptying thousands of bullets into a brain-dead boss character that has no interesting behaviors at all. They don't jump to different levels of elevation, they don't charge up an attack that you need to quickly disable, no environmental aspects like shooting exploding parts of the level to damage the boss.
Appropriate that he play the Pyromancer if what he wants is to roast the game. Bullseye says, I'd hire him to play the game before you release it. Negative feedback is feedback you need. Or hire him to roast your antagonist game. Yeah. Yeah, I don't know if Under the Mayo's a guy who can fake this kind of thing. He seems like one of those guys who's just like a hard on his sleeve type, which is, I think, becoming increasingly rare in the YouTube space. So it's kind of a nice thing to see in a way. But let's have the roast continue. Let's let the flames roll. Let's let the ignites roll.
Or knock out supports, or use other enemies against him somehow. They're all just the same straightforward thing of hold the crosshair on him and roll out of the way so you don't get hit. The worst part of the combat in Outriders is without question the AI, and this is where we have to get into my general distaste for cover shooters and looter shooters. These genres of games, while sometimes featuring a good title here and there, tend to be covers for bad AI. Artificial intelligence is hard to do. You need talented programmers. You can't just outsource it to another studio like you can with graphical assets. You need dedicated people who understand how to make intelligent enemy behaviors balanced around the player's capabilities and the level design. And I think a lot of studios don't want to put in that kind of work. So what do? They hide their enemies behind cover. They allow the player to passively recharge their health with hiding and recharging shields, or in the case of Outriders, life-leeching guns and abilities. They present difficulty in damage taken and enemy tankiness. It's why I stopped playing Borderlands 3 once I started getting to the higher tiers of the difficulty modifiers. The enemies weren't getting more interesting, they were just damaging me more and taking longer to kill, which is boring. I'd like to show this clip from our Lord and Savior Rich Evans, who explains this stuff perfectly.
Here's my question. Why do these games, these
I was not expecting to see the Red Letter Media drop in this video.
lazy games that just choose to be third-person shooters because they don't give a fuck, why is it always a third-person shooter? Is it because it's the easiest to make? You don't have to fucking worry about balance because you just take cover and heal?
It's the cover that makes it, because in first-person shooters, cover is really hard to come by, because then if you're in cover, you can't see the bad guys. And they have the auto heal.
But they don't have to worry about balancing your health to enemy damage.
Exactly. You could just run away and wait for a couple minutes for you to reheal. They
don't have to worry about having like quick, smooth movement gameplay action. They just pop, pop, pop. Is that it?
Yeah, that's it.
Okay.
Because then they don't need to like craft their levels for optimal gameplay experience. I just put some bad guys in there, he'll figure it out.
Put some cover in, and the bad guys show up.
Yep. People are making it through this area a little too fast. Put some more bad guys in there, or whatever, or let them get through the area really fast. It doesn't matter.
How good are the mechanics? I don't care. He pops up and he shoots. It's a third-person shooter. Don't you know?
Your AI should get smarter as the game gets more difficult, but
I just gotta really quickly respond to that. I mean, it's hard to make any video game people like. Any video game. It just so happens that, especially in the mid to late 2000s, a lot of people were proved to really fucking like third-person shooters with cover systems. People do it because a lot of people who play video games like it. I think Under the Mayo doesn't like it. Me, it's not to my preferences either. Kai says these critiques are pretty good. This is one of the big reasons why you don't get into combat in so many PvE games. I have a rant about the way that shooters changed starting in the mid 2000s, really up until the last few years, that I'm not going to go on today because that's not on topic. But I have a lot of sympathy for this argument. Okay, a little more.
But with Outriders, AI and smart do not belong in the same sentence. As I feared and predicted, the AI of Outriders across the board is moronic. Enemies sit behind cover spraying bullets the moment you're exposed, or they stand out in the open just begging to be shot. You unlock more world tiers to make the game more difficult, but they're still the same idiots. If your idea of fun is standing still while pumping endless bullets into big dumb bullet sponges that just stand there, this is the game for you.
Oh yeah. Shoot him. Shoot him good.
Playing in solo mode, the game absolutely
Okay. That was the main thing I wanted to show off. Hey, what's up, Young Unreal? Under the Mayo is going to go on to talk a little bit about the loot in the game, and his main point about the loot is just going to be to say that it doesn't really grab him, and his general perspective is that loot gets added to action games in order to excuse it from having poor action. That's his basic premise. And his justification for that is to say that people who enjoy loot in video games enjoy gambling. And I think we can infer that he thinks that's morally bad. So, yeah, this was a really effective takedown of Outriders that really, to me, came as a surprise. I don't agree with everything that Under the Mayo said. And like I said, when I watched this video for the first time, I felt upset and uncomfortable. And I really wanted to figure out why that was. Because here's a guy who got Doom Eternal right, who really understood what was good about that game. And I think one of the most useful skills you can have in, not just in video games or in journalism, but in life, is to look at something and understand what's good about it, what makes it desirable or effective or interesting to the people who engage with it, whatever it may be. And one of the biggest weaknesses that we can allow ourselves is to dismiss those things, is to dismiss someone else's preferences and interests rather than understand them. It all comes back to my favorite quote from Dutch philosopher Baruch Spinoza. Let me see if I can get the quote right. I have labored not to I've labored not to malign. I better just look this up. Unless y'all want to see me just spin my wheels. Here it is. I have labored carefully not to mock, lament, or execrate. Great word, by the way. Execrate human actions, but to understand them. There are times when we should condemn human actions and the humans who commit them. But it should not be early in the process. Okay. So in an interest not to execrate under the Mayo, for what very hot takes on a game that seems to be getting critical approval despite its obvious flaws, I went on a little bit of an expedition to understand a little bit more about Under the Mayo. And I'm also going to lay another brick here, which is the contrasting opinion about this game delivered by, who else? Skill Up. But before I talk about that, I'm going to take a very quick break. I'll be away from my keyboard for 2 or 3 minutes. I'll be right back and we'll get back into this. Have fun, chat. I shall return. So back to it. We just watched Under the Mayo take down Outriders. And he has a very different take on this game compared to, again, both creators who I love and respect, Skill Up. I'm going to show that take now. Here we go.
This video is brought to you by Nvidia and the new MSI GP66 Leopard 30 series laptop, which I got to check out as part of this review. Stick around to hear more about how Nvidia's and MSI's next-gen hardware can transform the way you play.
Yeah, we're not going to do that, but thanks.
One day, when I'm an old man and I retire from the YouTube grind, I'm going to sell my Lambo and all my pixel art NFTs that I bought for $100 million and this weird, creepy baby in a jar thing that I got with my copy of Death Stranding. And I'm going to move out to the woods in a little log cabin, and there, on an old-timey typewriter, I'm going to write my book. And you know what it's going to be called? It's going to be called Dumbass. The inside story of a man who wasted too much of his life playing broken looter shooters at launch. A memoir. Why do I keep doing this to myself? Ladies and gentlemen, Outriders is here. I have played about 55 hours of it now. I have finished the campaign. I have hit max level. I have reached deep into the endgame. I'm ready to tell you what I think about this game, and let me begin by saying this. I really hate that I can't recommend this to you. Outriders tacitly positioned itself as the anti-looter shooter, promising a campaign worth playing, a story with some actual effort put into it, build diversity that mattered during the campaign, a complete endgame experience that we could play on day one rather than needing to wait months or years for it to be patched in. And the thing is, they did it. The absolute madmen and women at People Can Fly delivered everything they promised. This is a superbly well-designed game, so much so that I am at times in awe of just how they managed to pull this off. It's some of the most balls-to-the-walls ridiculous loot flexibility I've ever seen in a looter, with perks that just should not exist because they're so fucking strong, and yet the game hangs together. There are viable choices across the different classes, skill trees, and perk pools. Encounter design doesn't completely crumple under the weight of all this flexibility, but nor does it feel like this impenetrable wall of bullet sponge enemies who just one-shot you when they glance in your general direction. So they pulled it off, they really did. Better than I anticipated, in fact. But my god in heaven, if this game isn't absolutely fucking balked at the moment. The technical issues this game suffers from right now are so profound and so destructive that it's just impossible to recommend this product at the moment. It's not just the server issues you've heard so much about, it's also client stability, where this game has crashed more than any other PC game I've ever reviewed. It's also just the general bugginess, some of which can completely wipe your character progress. All the items you spent dozens of hours grinding for, they just vanish in an instant. Outriders positioned itself as the anti-live service game, but when it comes to the technical side, it does a pretty good job of aping every single one of the technical issues that have plagued this style of game. The good news though, is that unlike so many of the unfinished, uninteresting, phoned-in, microtransaction-laden live service scams we've endured, Outriders is really good. And when the fog of all these technical issues has lifted, we're going to be left with a brilliant game that I suspect will have a big, bright future as one of the new pillars of the looter-shooter genre. I can't recommend Outriders to you yet, but when I can, I'm going to recommend it to you very strongly.
So out the gate, wow. It's like Skill Up is talking about a completely different game than Under the Mayo. Isn't that crazy? So out the box, let's talk about personal biases for me. When I see someone, so one of the things I called out with Under the Mayo is an occasional dip into propping up what feels like a straw man of something he disagrees with in order to knock it down easily. With Skill Up, I tend to get a sense when he's trying to represent something that someone else thinks and he doesn't necessarily think, or he does a very deft job of, in my opinion, reconciling different points of view while still telling you what he thinks. That is a difficult fucking skill, and one that I really give him major props for. And that immediately tends to recommend his opinion to me over an opinion that is acerbic and uncomfortable to watch. That's just a personal bias for me. And that's me being aware of myself. That's not necessarily me saying that you should care more about Skill Up's opinion or you should care more about Under the Mayo's opinion. Kai says, did Skill Up review the demo too? The other guy was kind of a doubling down in his demo review, so already negatively framed going on. Yes, he also did a demo review. This video is 50 minutes long. Skill Up's impressions on the demo is another 20 minutes. We're just not going to play all of it. I tried to pick the parts of what he has to say that seemed like are important to the main point. But yes, if you do want to hear his impressions, he has over an hour of content on his channel talking about this game. And probably some more on his second channel that he does with his brother called Layman Gaming. And he also has a weekly news like this. Skill Up just pumps out content, man. Yeah, he liked the demo. He did. We're going to hear some more of his thoughts, though. But I'm going to skip his impressions about the campaign. They're interesting, but the reason I'm going to skip it is because it's not something that that Under the Mayo really commented on. So it's not strictly relevant to what I'm trying to do, which is reconciling disagreements among two people whose opinions I value. It's kind of like seeing mom and dad argue. Like, it's distressing. You hate to see it. You can ask yourself whether I think Skill Up or Under the Mayo is the mom. Kai, interesting. So they both had completely different experiences from the start, and it seems like it's stayed consistent. Yeah. And to me, that observation then seems to intrinsically suggest that if they had different experiences from moment one, that their impression of the game says more about what they came into the game with than the game itself. And that's where I'm hoping to point towards. A little more from Skill Up on this, though. We're going to skip ahead to his comments about the combat and some of the stuff that we watched Mayo talk about.
But let's pretend for a moment that this game works. What's it like when it comes to combat?
Also skipped a lot of his coverage of the terrible, awful bugs, which, yes, they exist. Actually, both these guys exist. This game has terrible, awful bugs. Again, not diving into places where they agree, but places where there's fundamental disagreements.
I'm going to tell you, fucking great. I love it, and goddamn, it's so good. A while back, I talked about the fact that while the Outriders campaign was really repetitive, it was also really good, and I put this down to the fact that People Can Fly arrived at a gameplay loop that they knew worked, so they just rode that to the finish line. So what goes into that gameplay loop? A lot of talk right now revolves around the fact that Outriders has really cool gear, which it certainly does, and some really cool perks on that gear, which it certainly does. And I think a lot of people are going to argue that this is the secret sauce that holds Outriders together. I think it's much more fundamental than that. I think it's about the way that People Can Fly have built their class, enemy, level, and encounter design. I think this game would be fun and playable and enjoyable even without these insane perks. The perks are just the icing on the cake that make an already good game great. Class design is the foundation of this game. There are 4 unique...
As you're watching Skillup's coverage, Skillup's footage of himself playing, there's a question I'm trying to answer, and I'm not sure what I think about it yet, but I'm curious what you guys think. Is there a difference between the way that Under the Mayo and Skillup were playing the game? So Skillup said at the start that he'd played the game for 50 some odd, I think he said 55 hours. I'm not sure if that includes time on the demo. My understanding is not. So demo time plus 50 hours. Under the Mayo in his video said he'd only played for about 20. And one of the questions that we should examine, as Mayo did in his critique of people's complaints about the Doom Eternal Marauder, is this person competent enough to have the right opinion? And I'm not sure if that's playing out here. Curious what y'all think.
Unique classes that each have their own damage dealing archetype. The Devastator is a tank hybrid, is able to shield himself with rock and cause massive earthquakes and pile drive into his enemies from afar. The Trickster is your assassin, displacing space and time to slow enemies and teleport around the battlefield. Pyromancer is exactly what you expect. He burns things. And the Technomancer is your backline range DPS and support class, capable of dealing immense single target damage while freezing enemies. To play Destiny through with a single character is to experience most of what the game has to offer. Destiny's classes are different from one another, but subtly so, because much of the way that you play Destiny is about the weapons you have equipped, rather than the inherent design of the classes. In Outriders, the differences in class design are much more profound because a much larger portion of your moment-to-moment gameplay exists in your ability usage, and the way your abilities can be modified or further enhanced through weapon and gear perks. I don't think it's unfair to say that if you've played only one character in Outriders, you've really only experienced about a quarter of what the game has to offer. The classes are just so damn fun. My Trickster is like, I love her so much. She throws out these temporal knives to slow down bad guys. She's peeling back their skin with her spectral blade. She's going full blender mode, just mincing fools. She's teleporting here and there and everywhere, completely bamboozling the enemy. She's throwing up this massive time bubble thing that just makes me feel like Quicksilver in that X-Men Apocalypse scene. There's just so much.
I don't know if Skillup is cherry picking, but the combat he shows looks so much more interesting than what Under the Mayo was showing. So much more interesting.
Much in these kits. They're all stacked with these interesting, unique abilities that are also playable. You don't just use these classes. They aren't rag dolls that hold your weapons and armor. The classes are your weapons, and the gear you get just makes those classes stronger and more interesting. The issue of bullet builds is a hot topic at the moment. Long story short, 3 of the classes have a specific ability that massively buffs weapon damage, and if you mod it and combine it with specific perks, you can have 100% uptime on this, and it just absolutely shreds everything. There's a lot of build diversity in Outriders at the moment, and more of it is coming online every day as people gear up and theory craft new builds, but these bullet builds were by far the strongest, given the fact that every anomaly damage focused build just is nowhere near as powerful. People quickly figured all of this out, so every guide on YouTube was selling bullet builds dime a dozen, and as a result, within the first week the game was out, these abilities were nerfed, and no buffs were provided to any class to compensate for this. For the record, I think these abilities actually suck because they're boring. They don't deepen the playable experience of your class, they're just the ability equivalent of weapons go brrr. Having said that, this is a PvE game, and those abilities, they weren't hurting anyone. People were just using them because they gave them a clear shot at beating endgame content, and if that's what people want to do, then just let them do it. At the very least, if...
So, Under the Mayo also covered this problem of this week 1 nerf, and his takeaway was also negative but different. Skill Up is saying they were nerfed, and like that's okay because maybe it's okay because they weren't interesting abilities, and it's better when, and the implication is it's better when players are incentivized to pursue the ways to play the game that are more fun, because as we all know, gamers are very content to optimize the fun out of anything. So that recommends the change. But Skill's main critique is you didn't give any sugar with the salt. It was just all salt, just nerfs. Which I'm not sure what I think about that. I'm not sure I agree with Under the Mayo's take that week 1 nerfs are a bad thing. I guess it just depends. The first week is when the most people are playing the game, and the time during which people's impressions are being most definitively formed. So if there's an issue that's significant enough to steer people into playing in ways that are not fun, I guess I kind of get it. Consuted, the previous guy were actually playing the worst class in the game. Okay, so maybe that's part of the reason he didn't like the game, or part of the reason why his combat looked boring. And you can see here, Skill Up is he's showing off the assassin character. I think he showed off the pyro character as well, and I think he showed off the is it the Devastator that does the earthquake stuff, which is the one that Under the Mayo was playing. And Skill Up is suggesting here that part of the game is all the different classes. You'll notice, like, the focus of the critique being different for each of these guys. Skill Up is really focused on the things that the player is and can do, whereas Mayo is very focused on what the world is throwing at him. It's very interesting seeing those different, maybe an appropriate term would be locus of control. I'm not sure. I'm testing that thought in my mind. But while I do so, let's watch a bit more.
If People Can Fly had paired these nerfs with appropriate buffs to other abilities, particularly underperforming anomaly abilities, I think these changes wouldn't have met the swift outcry they did. Anyway, outside of this issue, I don't think anyone can argue the fact that People Can Fly delivered some amazing class design here, and this is going to be one of the biggest reasons that people will stick with this game, to level all 4 classes and experience what they have to offer. Gunplay is a different story. Coming back to the Destiny example, you may not want to play Destiny for its classes, but you'd certainly play it for its guns, where each individual archetype or exotic feels so damn unique. To pick up a weapon in Destiny is to begin a relationship with it, to caress it gently and whisper sweet nothings into its ear in the hope that it will share with you its secrets, the nuances of its recoil direction, the layering of its sound design, the snappiness of its draw and aim speeds, or the generosity of its aim assist. This relationship with a weapon is inherently harder to achieve in third-person games because in addition to communicating all of those subtleties, you're also forced to give the player a lot of information about the locomotion of the character holding that weapon, their position, their movement speed from cover, their body weight shift as they round corners. Still, the Division did a fantastic job of this and carved out some really unique feeling weapons and weapon archetypes that feel distinct within your arsenal. Outriders doesn't achieve this. There are a limited range of weapons, assault rifles, double guns, which are basically like assault rifles, SMGs, which are basically like assault rifles but short range, LMGs, which are basically like assault rifles but with more recoil, pump-action shotguns, automatic shotguns, rifles of both the bolt-action and automatic variants, and sidearms. I'm being a little reductive in the way I'm describing them, but they definitely don't carve out the unique profiles that you might hope for. Within the assault rifle, SMG, double gun, and LMG categories in particular, the similarities between them are just too similar, and the difference is not different enough. There are legendaries in this game, but from what I can tell, their legendary status comes from appearance and the perks they have. They don't come from unique handling profiles that make them feel distinct from other weapons in the game. Don't quote me on that. It's possible that as I play and collect more legendaries, I'll find other things, but I've got about 10 so far, and they all feel pretty much the same as everything else I've used. None of this is a damning assessment, by the way. We play different games for different reasons. I suspect the main thing pulling you back towards Outriders will be the satisfaction of using your spectral blade to fillet a group of mercenaries, more than it will be your desire to fire a specific weapon you've picked up. When it comes to level design, enemy design, and encounter design, I think it's best to talk about these things together, because here in Outriders, these things really can't exist without one another. So what does that mean? I think if you took an elite from Halo and you put it in a big round room with no cover, or a long corridor with lots of cover, or a beachhead with a mix of open space and cover, that enemy type will work no matter where you put it. Its functionality exists independent of the environment that it's in. I think most Bungie designed enemies are like this, and it's one of the secrets to their combat formula. In Outriders, the functionality of enemies is intrinsically linked to the environment that they exist in. Riflemen exist to sit behind cover and pepper you with light damage. If you were to put them into a wide open space with no cover, you'd immediately just explode them and they'd pose no challenge. Same goes with snipers, who exist exclusively in the longer arenas where you have to cross a lot of distance to reach them. If they spawned in smaller areas, you just run straight up to them and explode them. Same goes for the monster variant enemies, which almost all run straight up to you and attempt to eat your face. These enemies always exist in areas with almost no cover, because you need to be able to shoot them as they approach you, and if your line of sight was obstructed on their approach, then that enemy type would feel suffocating and unfair. Enemies in this game are essentially environmental assets. They are turrets that are strategically placed, or they are wind-up cars that are pulled back and launched towards you. Enemy AI in this game is really dumb, because enemies don't need to be smart. They just need to know where to stand and what their lines are. The stage is set so that the moment you walk in, it's lights, camera, action. On the whole, this works.
I need to pause after that. That is a remarkably different take under the Mayo, whose take was essentially, dumb AI is bad. And it's bad because it's hard to make good AI, and this studio didn't try hard. That was Mayo's argument, basically. Skill Up's argument is that it's bad because it doesn't need to be good. Who's right? Is the AI bad being bad a problem? Or is it just something that's not important? And it depends who you ask, it seems like. So the question then is, why is good AI important to Mayo in a way that it's not really that important to Skill Up? Let's see how much further we going on this. About 5 more minutes.
Works extremely well. I would say that the biggest reason the campaign doesn't feel repetitive is that People Can Fly knew how to set up these arenas to always be engaging, and knew how to move between the different styles of combat at regular intervals to keep things feeling fresh. I loved walking into a trench warfare arena knowing that I'd have to figure out how to cross no man's land. I loved walking into an industrial block knowing that I'd be able to utilize cover for a precious few seconds while I reload or wait for abilities to charge. I loved walking into wide open forested areas knowing that my AoE focused build was going to shine here as enemies hurtle towards me relentlessly. There's enough familiarity within the structure for you to plan your approach, but enough variance to keep you on your toes, and I really loved that. There are some oppressive factors within this formula though. The accuracy tuning of ranged enemies is a little bit ridiculous. I mean, as soon as you pop your head out, every single rifleman just immediately snaps to you like they're using an aimbot. Snipers,
they agree on this.
Oh my god. There are big problems with snipers. These guys can shoot you from like 6 football fields away, and they simply do not miss. And when they do hit you, it knocks you out of cover. So all the riflemen are like, yeah boy, this is our time to shine. The aggressiveness of the monster enemies as well could probably do with some adjustment. They just dogpile you so relentlessly, especially when you're playing solo, and they stagger you and they hit you, and some of them will shake your screen, so you can kind of get caught in this stagger loop where you just don't get the chance to aim your weapon and you just get shreked. These things all need some adjustment to give the player just a little more room to breathe. The last thing I find really fascinating about Outriders is its push-forward combat formula, which...
Something else I just feel compelled to remark on is Skill Up gave us the general idea of his take about what Outriders is trying to do with their AI, and then some outlier situations about where it doesn't work. That kind of take is very robust and usable to a large number of people. And that's what Skillup markets his content towards. He's a AAA action game reviewer. It's what he does. And I have to ask myself sometimes about the way these videos are made is how much of it does come back to how these creators are incentivized by the audiences that they've attracted. Under the Mayo has got a very different looking audience from Skillup, I would guess, as someone who loves challenge and doom and skill. And whereas Skillup, interestingly enough, doesn't seem to comment very much on how hard the game pushes him to be good, to skill up.
Stands out as a really unique addition to the looter shooter genre. Push-forward combat is a term popularized by id Software when they were explaining the design philosophy underpinning Doom 2016. They argued that in order for the game to communicate the fearlessness, brutality, and power of the Doomslayer, there couldn't be moments when he was in retreat. Put another way, cover is for cowards, and the Doomslayer ain't no coward. The result was a gameplay loop that required the Doomslayer to glory kill his enemies for both health and ammo, pushing the player out of more passive modes of play and into a constant dance of all-out frontline assault. Outriders does something similar. Each class is able to heal itself by doing damage in a particular way. The Trickster and the Devastator heal from dealing close-range damage, the Pyromancer heals by applying burn damage, and the Technomancer heals from any damage dealt, since locking him into long-range healing wouldn't work with the way a lot of the endgame encounters are designed. What this model does more than anything else is turn Outriders into a game about momentum. When your character is rolling and it's just killing things to get buffs and it's mowing down fodder, you just fucking push because you are just getting so much healing all the time. In my view, this is actually the most aggressively implemented form of push-forward combat I've ever experienced. Bloodborne had it, but you only used it to recover health after you made a mistake. Doom had it, but you used your glory kills like a sort of punctuation mark in between your assaults. Here in Outriders, it's just this endless carnage that's never supposed to end. You are constantly just in this bloodlust state where you are just pushing your character to its absolute limit because that's the only way your class can get the healing it needs to survive. The flip side to this is that when this momentum is interrupted, Outriders can really break down in a way that Doom or Bloodborne can't. Health regen is capped at 50% if your health gets low enough, so if you're playing the Trickster and you're pinned down in a long area with snipers and riflemen off in the distance, you're pretty screwed then, unless you have some health regen perks or weapon stats that will allow you to heal at range. A simple change allowing you to regen to full health when in cover wouldn't break the game, and it will allow classes like the Trickster or the Pyromancer to regain their footing in preparation for their next assault. The minor issues I've listed in this section, the balancing, the gunplay, some of the more...
Holy shit, okay. So, we heard Mayo cover the healing in combat in like a single throwaway line in his assessment. You heal by doing damage, I think. Very simple, dismissively, not going into it. Here we have Skillup devoting a few paragraphs of writing and comparing it to freaking Doom of all things. How did Mayo miss this? He is the Doom guy. And here's where I'm not sure that Mayo did a good enough job digging into the way this game works. And with the tone of his review, it seems as though he came in looking for ways to tear it down. That's an impression. And Skillup is suggesting an alternate view of the system, which makes sense, it's well presented, and it hangs together with everything else we're seeing. The combat he's showing us is more interesting. We know he put in more time. We also know that Skillup plays lots of games like these, and probably came in more at a higher level of competence with these kinds of games. So, although one of the hardest things when you're trying to split the difference between unreliable narrators is when they come in at a difference not only of what they say, but about what their let me think of a way to say this. If they come in at a different level of competence with regard to the subject. I mean, I've seen a lot of Mayo's footage. Like, this is a guy who does Ultra Nightmare runs. Skillup's a good gamer, I'm sure, but he's just not. He's not at Mayo's level when it comes to Doom. Mayo is the guy we should trust to tell us what's good about Doom. And maybe Skillup is the guy we should trust to tell us what's good about Outriders. But how can we hear Skillup's truth about Doom and Mayo's truth about Outriders without dismissing it altogether? Or without just picking the creator we like better based on our personal preferences? That's the crusade that we're on, baby. Why? Because I can't help it. A little bit more. And what a crusade it is. Amen, Lanzer. We're almost done here, actually.
Impressive enemy design. None of it takes away from the raw thrill of this game's combat. Every moment in this game feels like that scene in The Predator where they're just shooting and yelling, only instead of shooting trees, I'm shooting bad guys. I'm just unloading magazines and yelling and sometimes reloading and then more yelling. It's this feeling of power that these games are always trying to give us, but it's so complete and unrestrained here, and it only gets better and better the deeper you get into the end game.
All right, we're not going to watch the loot and end game section, even though it's interesting. If you want to, I encourage you to follow the link, which will be in the inevitable description of this video. So I think I mainly said in line all the stuff I care to about SkillUp did in this video. I actually watched the SkillUp video first. And so to me, the Under the Mayo take was a surprise. I wanted to present it this way, though, because I think it showing both Doom in terms of complaint and then response, and then Outriders both in terms of complaint and response has some symmetry to it, which pleases me. Okay. So what do we do with this? How do we cut this knot? At the start of this presentation, I talked about the unreliable narrator, which is a term that is used in storytelling, but I think which has application in our day-to-day consumption of reality, which is essentially the very simple idea that anything you hear from someone, we should not trust as being 100% account of the truth. And there are tons of reasons for why that would be. All we need to do is watch a news broadcast to understand what many of those reasons would be. We all naturally assess the trust we should be placing in whoever is giving us their opinion and information. You should be checking me to make sure what I'm telling you is worth believing and being interested in. And these creators, Mayo and SkillUp, are two guys that I both admire and respect, and I'm going to watch more of their content. And it really bothered me to see this disagreement. So let's see. For me, the way I've always found to deal with conflicting realities, I'm a context guy. What's that scene from The Wire about context being important? You have to have a lot of context to examine just about anything in depth. And I think that Mayo and SkillUp both have opinions and voices that have merit and value in the overall landscape of how we talk about video games, which is something I'm extremely passionate about. I've already told you, I've already gushed over SkillUp's writing And you can see the way he presents his videos. Like, he's just a very good video maker. And Mayo is just this, like, heart on the sleeves, gonna tell you what he's passionate about. And when you hear that, you better fucking listen. Because you don't get to hear someone tell you about their passion in a way that is effective and coherent very often in this world. So how do we bring them together? Okay. So I think to bring them together a little bit, what we need to do is go back to the foundations of these two guys. And what I've done is I've actually pulled out a couple videos, one from each creator, that I think speaks towards the core of what these players look for and how they came differently into this experience. Let's pull those up.
Let me ask you a question. What if every level in Tetris could be beaten by just putting any block wherever you want, and the only reason to set up large clears was a point system? What if in Metal Gear Solid, the alert system didn't cause more enemies to come in and hunt you? What if in Gears of War, you had 20 times the health and never had to reload your guns? You would never have any reason to play these games well, to engage in their systems. You would never need to think about your block placement and plan your next move. You'd have no reason to use stealth mechanics to avoid detection. You wouldn't need to use the cover system the game is built around. Games need to push you into their systems through challenge. This is challenge-based player engagement. Let's look at one of the greatest games of all time, Super Mario 64. It was revolutionary in its large open design, movement freedom, the music is great. I mean, there's so much to love about it. But what keeps you playing is the gameplay. To beat Mario 64, you need to collect stars throughout the level to open doors that lead to the rest of the game, eventually unlocking the final boss door with 70 stars. Some of these stars are easy to get, but some of them are quite tricky, and if you want to progress through the game, you need to engage in the gameplay systems the developers created and start playing the game better, using things like the ground pound to eliminate fall damage from a big jump, using the triple jump to increase your jump distance and reach a faraway star, wall jumping to reach high areas. Mario 64 is a platformer with thoughtful design put into the options for the player. Some of these stars can be rather difficult for a new player to get. They're gonna fail repeatedly, missing jumps, dying, screwing up their coordination. They may get frustrated, but since the game is so fun, that frustration eventually leads to excitement and satisfaction once you finally pull off that difficult jump and get the star you've been after for 10 minutes now. And not only do you get the star, you learn new skills that can apply to the rest of your playthrough. You'll get so good at the game that when you start your second playthrough, it'll be a whole new experience for you going in as a good player. And there are so many awesome techniques and strategies to learn that you can study the game for years and become a speedrunner if you want. Now, close your eyes for a moment and
Mario 64. I just want to take a moment. People comparing things to Mario 64 is an easy way into my heart, because Mario 64 to me was really the game that pushed me into engaging with games in the way that I do now and have for the last 25 years. I played Nintendo and Super Nintendo growing up, but it wasn't until Mario 64 and the N64 and getting my hands on that game at a Toys R Us demo stand in the mid 90s, and having my brain blow up and feeling my mind like rewrite itself. Like, I felt the plasticity molding in my brain as I was playing this game. Seeing a 3D world presented that way, it for me unlocked the ability to see games as worlds, which I never really did before that. Nick also played it at a stand at Toys R Us. Nice. So for me, Mario 64 was like the gateway in a lot of ways. There were more gateways into other experiences, but it was a very important one at that time. And yeah, it definitely, Mario 64 was a game that encouraged experimentation and rewarded you. It definitely didn't require you to do all the hardest things to get the stars. It was quite sandboxy in that way. But let's hear the rest of his argument. Challenge matters.
Imagine a Mario 64 where every star is on the ground. Maybe not every star, but all stars needed to progress and beat the game. Enter this world and just run around picking up the stars on the ground and then move on to the next world and repeat.
It's a very modern sounding game design, right? Make it so that in order to progress at a minimal level, like a very minimal level of abilities needed. Interesting.
Would Mario 64 be considered a great game if that were the case? The systems would still be there, you could still triple jump and wall jump and all that cool stuff, but there would be no actual reason to use it. Most people would play the game never learning the interesting systems or seeing all the coolest areas, and they would think it was really basic and boring. And it would be pretty ridiculous to then scold those people and say, well, why aren't you exploring the world and using all the cool jumping mechanics? There's so much depth. You're choosing to play the game in a boring way. If Mario 64 were designed like that, and players came away thinking the game was pretty boring, would you blame the players for not trying to have fun? Or would you blame the game for not pushing the players into its fun systems? The challenge involved in collecting the required stars is what drives the player to engage in the game's systems and fall in love with the gameplay through experimentation, through creative problem solving, through mastery of the controls, through failure and success. Good games push you into their systems. I'm not saying there aren't exceptions, but if you think of the best games of all time, you'll find that the majority of them directly connect their gameplay systems with challenge. Challenge-based gameplay isn't only for games with a focus on action or platforming. We can apply this to Resident Evil. What is involved in enjoying the Resident Evil experience for the first time? Exploring the map in search of important items and resources. Avoiding combat when possible because you don't have a lot of ammo, which plays into the tension and fear. Making smart decisions in the management of your inventory. If you can only hold 8 items, or 6 in the case of Chris, you can't run around with 80% of your inventory filled with weapons and ammo. You won't have room for keys or puzzle items. You can't play overcautiously with half an inventory of health items for the same reason. The challenge in Resident Evil doesn't come from the action or the deadliness of the zombies. It comes from your inventory, exploration, puzzle solving, resource management, and if you're not used to them, the controls. Now, let's imagine the first time you play Resident Evil, they give you a grenade launcher with 200 rounds. What effect would that have on the game? You would never fear a zombie encounter, you could kill every single enemy easily, you wouldn't need any other weapons, so your inventory space is freer, so you don't have to think about that either. You would never take damage, making health items irrelevant, further freeing up the inventory. You'd have less reason to explore the maps because you don't need any resources. Basically, the entire game breaks down because the challenge is gone. And
another way to think about challenge is incentives, too, right? Challenge presents an incentive. Challenge creates incentive for players to engage in different ways. If you remove the challenge, you change the incentives.
And without the challenge, there's no reason to engage in the survival systems. Could you blame people for thinking Resident Evil sucks if that's how it was? I'm sure there's people who would still enjoy it, just running around blasting enemies that stand no chance and never having to think about anything. And you can do that once you unlock the infinite rocket launcher, but you gotta actually play the game first. Getting that rocket launcher is your reward for mastering the game's systems and becoming a good Resident Evil player, so good that you can beat the game in under 3 hours. This isn't a new concept, but it's a topic that's been in discussion more lately, especially on my channel with the success of Doom Eternal and videos I've made on Titanfall 2 and Devil May Cry 5. If this is the first time you've seen a video on my channel, at the time of making this video, my channel is mostly known for my coverage of Doom Eternal. Not the story or the art or news, but analysis of the gameplay, enemy AI, weapon strategies, and how the game leans into its systems. It's a game that has very deliberate design decisions behind it. Being a good Doom Eternal player means that you use a variety of weapons, stay very mobile, watch your equipment charges, master the strategies behind taking down different kinds of enemies. The game uses the first few levels to show you some of these systems and get you out of lazy habits by giving you a low ammo capacity at the start so you use more than one gun, and with a weak point targeting system that incentivizes you to use different mods and put the odds more in your favor. You don't have to do these things, but the game will be much smoother if you do, and you'll be involved in a very active gameplay experience. As the game loosens up on these restrictions, you'll unlock higher ammo capacities and be able to rely more on your weapons of choice. But by that time, you've already experienced the benefit of cycling through different weapons, so you probably won't. The game pushes you just enough to let you fall in love with the systems they're showing you, and then gives you the freedom to continue using those systems if you so choose once you advance past the first levels. You start meeting different enemies that encourage you to continue engaging in these systems. Maybe at this point you're mostly using the sticky bombs and the plasma rifle. But then there's the Prowler, a quick teleporting enemy that harasses at a distance and clobbers you up close. He's fast, evasive, and hard to target. Then you realize that the meat hook on the super shotgun causes him to freeze in place, and an up-close double-barrel shot instantly kills him. It's not the only way, but if you start using the meat hook when you see prowlers, you're getting used to even more weapon switching, and now you're flying around the arena with the meat hook in a very deliberate way. From there, it's a very easy step in logic to start thinking about using the meat hook as a killing blow for enemies that are close to death, using it to escape a dangerous situation, using it to get airborne over the battlefield. Once you get the ballista, you can one-shot a prowler at a distance to stagger him, and then meat hook over to perform the glory kill and get a health bonus. The game is full of little things like this that push the player into using its interesting and creative systems, and showing them how fun the game can be if you choose to engage with them. It's not just that the options are there, it's that the options actually mean something in the gameplay. Just like with Mario 64, figuring out that you can reach a star with a wall jump is the game pushing you into its systems, and the developers are hoping that you'll end up enjoying those systems and find yourself inspired to dive deeper into them and use them creatively. If every star could be collected by ignoring the game's systems, the systems would have no reason to exist. This brings me back to Titanfall 2 and Devil May Cry 5. Admittedly, Titanfall 2 has some really awesome advanced movement mechanics. It's fast, there's sliding, wall running, sprinting doesn't cancel reload animations so there's no interrupting your speed, online multiplayer has stuff like grapple hooks. It's one of the reasons the game is so loved by its community. Because of my love for Doom Eternal, a lot of people told me I need to play the campaign of Titanfall 2. I'm not a multiplayer fan, so the multiplayer was not suggested to me. I heard the single-player campaign was great, so I checked it out. And in my video, I said that yes, the movement is great, the guns feel good to use, the levels are cool, but the enemy variety is severely lacking and the AI is straight up bad. The AI issue is huge because in a game where the player has so much mobility and power, the enemies need to be smart enough to deal with it. The enemies in Titanfall 2 just kinda stand there like idiots, and the solution to most combat encounters is just barge into the room and blast everyone in the chest. Yes, the game has really cool systems of advanced movement, which are showcased in the multiplayer, but if the AI is so bad that advanced movement isn't even slightly necessary, what's the point? If your response is because the movement mechanics are fun to do, right, I hear you, I agree they are fun, but if they're ultimately meaningless, that fun is pretty fleeting. It's like telling the Mario player that they should be wall jumping and exploring because it's fun, even if every star needed to win is on the ground. It's a failure of game design, not the player. The same issue is present in Devil May Cry 5. The game is known for its stylish combos and deep combat, but the game doesn't offer new players difficulty options higher than normal on their first playthrough. And that first playthrough is filled with non-aggressive enemies with low health that can be killed by mashing one attack button. On top of that, it has a bunch of orbs that let you revive if you die, and the game gives you 100,000 red orbs at the start to unlock your abilities, so you don't even have the incentive to do stylish combos to gain more orbs. You already have every ability you need, and there isn't even a reason to use those abilities since the game is so easy. The criticism I get from this is that I'm supposed to be trying to fill up my style meter, but the style meter doesn't mean anything. If I just wanted a combo simulator, that would be fine, but I want a well-crafted campaign that challenges me and has in-game benefits to engaging with its systems. Games should make a player fall in love with how it's supposed to be played, not assume the player is automatically going to play that way. Devil May Cry 5 has amazing systems, but its refusal to push new players into those systems leaves a lot of players thinking the game is just a boring mash fest because they don't get to the point where you unlock challenging difficulties that actually require you to play well. People need more than an arbitrary style meter on the side of the screen to feel good about doing a long flashy combo. They need to see that their long flashy combo is helping them take down that difficult enemy that's been giving them problems. And then they'll be inspired to experiment with it more, because when your brain can relate success with the mastery of the game's systems, fun, in its truest form, is bound to emerge. I know of this firsthand because I played DMC5 all the way through on normal and was bored to tears. And then when I unlocked hard, I started to have fun because playing the game well and doing combos became crucial to my survival. Eventually, I fell in love with the game's combat, and I was so upset that the game had sabotaged my first playthrough by not trusting me enough to handle a hard difficulty if I wanted it. In action games, a lot of the challenge comes from the AI, and AI complexity is dependent on the player's options. Doom Eternal's AI needs to be really fast and smart to deal with how crazy you can be in that game. But then a game like Dead Space doesn't need its AI to be that complex. Your mobility options are very limited, with clunky walking, you can't jump, dash, or dodge. The action is claustrophobic and uncomfortable sometimes. The enemies don't need to be anything more than creatures that scurry around and run at you. Their simple nature complements the player's options to create a solid action horror experience, one where the challenge of the game pushes you into its systems of hunting for resources and severing the limbs of monsters to disable them, deal extra damage, and conserve ammo. I could go on forever listing all the games that intelligently mold their systems into their gameplay. Street Fighter would suck if all you had to do to win was mash the jab button. Halo would suck if enemies weren't a threat to you. Dark Souls would suck if you could cancel your attack animations. Hell, basketball would suck if you never had to pass the ball to your teammates. I'll bet you that the majority of games you've ever enjoyed have functioned like this. So the phenomenon on my channel of people saying you want everything to be Doom Eternal when I'm simply asking games to connect challenge to their gameplay systems has been... infuriating isn't the word, not even annoying. I think it's just depressing. Doom Eternal just happens to be the best modern example of all this, and it seems to be the first time that developers have come out strongly talking about this all the time. So much that it got us talking about it ourselves and seeing it everywhere. It's what they call the fun zone, and it applies to so many games. The fact that wanting a game to be challenging enough to push a player into its systems makes some people think only of Doom Eternal proves that an entire generation has been ruined by 2 console cycles of games treating them like babies. Not to throw all the blame in one direction, but it's symptomatic of open world design. The whole go anywhere, do whatever you want, choose from 1,000 different weapons philosophy behind some of the biggest titles of the past 10 to 15 years. I'm not saying they're all bad games by definition. I've enjoyed some open world games where you can just do everything however you want. There are some great games in that sandbox style, but it's left us with large groups of people who can't enjoy a game if it doesn't just let them run about screwing around at their own pace. Now, I don't want this to be construed as me saying that every game has to be really difficult. Difficulty is subjective. One man's challenging is another man's easy. What's more important is that the game pushes you into engaging with what makes it great, whether that be something simple or complex. Like Tetris, very simple game, easy in the starting levels, you don't have to rack your brain and practice to figure out the basics, but you certainly can't just mash your fingers randomly on the buttons and find success. You aren't going to find yourself in the later levels of Tetris without understanding how to play. I also don't want people to think that I'm looking down on those who enjoy incredibly easy experiences where they can just casually fly through a game without learning anything. That's fine, have fun, but I don't think it's good for that to be the goal at the center of a game's design.
I'm going to withhold this thought until the video's over. Continue, Mayo.
If they want to offer a super easy difficulty level for people who want absolutely nothing demanded of them, fine by me. God of War 2018 has an easy mode that can literally be completed by a corpse, but it's a disservice to your game if you're not going to offer a higher level experience to everyone else. I'll leave you with this. Next time you're playing a game, be it old or new, take a moment to appreciate if the game has good systems and if you're being pushed into them. Most of the time, that will be the case. And if the game isn't doing that, think about what could be done to make it better. You'll be a more discerning player, and you'll start to appreciate the games you love even more. Thank you for watching. I enjoy these design discussions very much. I invite you to check out other videos on my channel if you're new here. I stream on Twitch, I have a Patreon and a merch store, and I'll be back soon with more stuff. Later.
So that was under the Mayo. Talking about why challenge matters, which I think is about as close as we're going to get to the center of his philosophy and why he shows up to do this kind of commentary. Consuited says, people think of Titanfall 2. I don't think anyone would expect good AI. Right. So why does Mayo expect it? A couple things that he said that I want to draw out a little bit. Number one, why isn't he interested? If he likes challenge, why doesn't he play multiplayer games? I don't think there's any level of challenge that Doom could provide that would be higher than the level of challenge that can be found at the highest levels of competitive multiplayer games. I'm not saying that he should like those things. I'm just saying the reason that he pursues challenging single player games should tell us something about why he games. And it should suggest something about the way we should see his takes on other games. And look, my fundamental exercise here is to understand what is being produced by these gentlemen, not to tear it down. And I think the idea that challenge should matter is one that is gaining more and more acceptance in the broader community of games. I think it's fair to suggest that as the audience for gaming has ballooned in the last, especially decade and a half, that we've seen a pivot of AAA games that at one point, back in the days of perhaps Halo or back in the days of Unreal Tournament, a game which I know he played, or in the original Doom, the people who played video games at that time were kind of nerds. Like, if being a gamer back then was more of a pejorative term, it was less acceptable. I know, because I was like one of them. Especially if you're playing computer games, what it took to actually get a computer to play a video game, especially if you're playing something online, had a very high floor in terms of work and understanding and just effort to even get to play a game compared to today. Consoles was a different story, of course, but games back then didn't have the layers of sophistication we see with loot, with multiplayer. They were much more tending to be designed in this way. Where a challenge would matter, and it would drive players to engage in systems. And I think that modern gaming, as it's gotten bigger and bigger, has been testing the idea of whether or not challenge matters. And so it's no surprise to me that Mayo would get passionate about a game like Doom Eternal, which embraces the idea that challenge matters. Here's what I know about Doom Eternal, and from watching interviews with Hugo Martin, is that for Hugo, he loved Doom and everything that was good about it, but he was frustrated that everyone played Doom basically by just using the super shotgun. Everyone picked their favorite weapon, and that's all they used. And to him, that wasn't the players engaging with the world in the way that he wanted. They weren't getting the maximum fun out of the game, his opinion. He has talked also about a pre-release demo of Doom Eternal that was released. It shows him flopping around the arena, doing weapon swaps and doing all this stuff. And he has admitted after the fact that all that weapon swapping and dashing around that he did was totally not needed. And that at the time, Doom Eternal was in a state where the game did not push you to engage with its systems. And all the stuff he did was all for show. And if players were only incentivized to perform in the way that would allow them to progress, they would play in a way that was less interesting, less fun, and less of what to him was good about Doom. And so what happened? One of the first things that Hugo did was he started experimenting with adding things to monsters, adding things like weak spots to monsters and weapon-specific interactions. the cacodemons, the floating sphere dudes, you can shoot them with a regular gun if you want, or you can just toss a sticky grenade into their mouth. Boop. That instantly stops them in their tracks, and a few seconds later, they become glory killable. That's a weapon-specific interaction. What else? The cyber demons, the little brains with the mechanical spider legs. They have a turret. It's a pain in the ass. But if you snipe it, pop, with the machine gun sniper, then it instantly takes out that turret. Also, you can sticky grenade in it with a variety of other effects. So Hugo started layering on aspects to Doom that did exactly what Mayo is asking for, which is forcing players to engage with the interesting parts of the game by allowing them to fail if they do not. And I think there's perhaps a conversation to be had about failure tolerance when it comes to this kind of gaming as well. At this point, I think we have a pretty good read on what's important to Mayo. He likes games that push back at him and have interesting payoffs for getting pushed at. He mentioned Devil May Cry and Titanfall. Those are great examples in different ways. Titanfall, my experience of it has been that all the movement stuff is not really needed for the campaign, as he mentioned, but he roundly rejected how important it is for the multiplayer. If I have a question for May, it would be, why don't you play multiplayer games? I mean, he put 750 hours into Doom. It sounds like he has the time. There are plenty of multiplayer shooters that have interesting movement systems. Look at Apex, which is a game that copied a lot of those things by the same developer as Titanfall. Another suggestion I would have for Mayo to think about, if I could be so bold, is that he doesn't seem to understand. He doesn't seem to. Sorry, let me think of a better way of putting this. I want to be fair. He seems confused about why people wouldn't agree with him. When he sees an opinion that differs from him, his response is to double down on what he thinks. And I suspect that there might be something to be learned there in understanding why people don't agree with him. Again, if I were him, that's what I would want, but that's just the kind of person I am. I revel in that kind of conflict, that kind of dialectical opposition. I think that most interesting truths that are out there to be learned must be learned by holding up things that are both seemingly true but disagree with each other, which is exactly what we're doing. But at its core, Mayo preaches a message that I greatly resonate with. Challenge does matter. And I, too, get frustrated when games do not push you to engage with their interesting systems. To me, out of a seeming apology, oftentimes, to players who they want to play their game, but they don't want to ask to be bothered. And I don't tend to think that having selectable difficulties is the best way to handle those, although it is the industry standard at this point, let's be honest. Okay. I want to jump right into the next thing. Mayo, fantastic dude, and worth listening to on many, many things. And I think we have a pretty good read on him, like I said. I want to talk about Skill Up next. So Skill Up, I also have a video that I think preaches to some of the core of what he likes. We're going to watch that, and then we're going to talk about what I took away from understanding what they at their core like, how that reflects on their experiences of the Marauder and Outriders, and how that then reflects back on me. And I'm going to take another 3-minute break. I'll be right back. Okay. And the streamer is running out of steam. Let's punch through this thing. So here's a video from SkillUp that I think will help us understand why he loves Outriders and why he doesn't like Marauders. Again, this is SkillUp on what I think is a core part of what he gets from Outriders, Doom, and all games, and his review of Warframe.
Recently, I was streaming the Destiny 2 beta, and someone asked me what was the best part about being a YouTuber. A few people in the chat began yelling things like free games or free trips, and a fellow YouTuber, a good friend of mine named The Jez, commented that the best part was being self-employed. And all of these things are true. But for me, the very best part about being a YouTuber is that I get to share my love of video games with other people who also love video games. And when I say I love video games, I don't just mean I love playing them, I mean I love the art form of the video game, and the design of video games, and the development of video games, and the business of video games, and the personalities behind video games, and the cultural impact of video games. I love all of it. And can I just say that it's pretty rare that I encounter a game that teaches me something new and different about all of these things at once. But that's exactly what happened when I recently downloaded and started playing Warframe, the third-person sci-fi action RPG shooter from developer Digital Extremes. Without question, Warframe is one of the most fascinating games I have ever encountered because of the boldness of its design choices and the technical competence with which it executes on those choices. It's fascinating because of the uniqueness of its visual and sound palette and the way it brings together so many different influences and inspiration and marries them together in such coherent presentation. It's fascinating because it's a studio of 170 people that have produced one of the largest, most feature-rich games I have ever played, where developers literally 8 or 10 times their size achieve far, far less over the same 4-year stretch. It's fascinating because where so many developers are streamlining and dumbing down their games, Warframe retains an uncompromising commitment to depth, diversity, and outright complexity that makes the game infinitely replayable to those that invest the time to understand
that modding
and
system, boy.
that complexity.
Woo.
And it's fascinating because it's delivered all of this through a free-to-play model that is remarkably fair, providing true value for money for those that choose to spend, and respecting the time and commitment of those that choose not to. I walked into Warframe expecting something average, and what I got instead was something spectacular. It's a game that will only appeal to a certain type of player, but if you are that player, Warframe is almost certain to surprise and delight you. I've tried to find a review that did this game justice in its 2017 state, one that reflects how far this game has come over the last 4 years, and really explained what it felt like to play Warframe. But I couldn't find one, so here I am today, hoping to fill that gap. Ladies and gentlemen, I present to you my review of Warframe.
Chills, man. Fuck.
Some 4 years ago, I bought a PlayStation 4. As is typical of most launch machines, there weren't many games available at that time, and most of them were in fact pretty average. For the first time with the release of a new console though, a number of free-to-play games were available at launch, stuff like Blacklight Retribution, or DC Universe Online, or War Thunder. And amidst this rather small list of games was one more, a game called Warframe, a console port of a PC exclusive game from a little known developer called Digital Extremes. I remember installing and playing Warframe back then and immediately writing it off. More than anything else, the game did a terrible job of explaining what it actually was. I ran through levels and killed enemies in one hit, leading me to believe that the combat was absurdly one-dimensional. The tagline for the game was, and still is, ninjas play free, and I was so confused by this because from what I could see, there weren't any damn ninjas. After completing the opening missions, I was essentially just plonked into the middle of a big star map with no idea where to go and no incentive to continue. I logged off, uninstalled the game, and didn't give it a second thought for a long, long time.
Pause. I'm looking at what you're saying, Rice. Warframe, best game ever. Warframe is a singular, incredible, unique game. I have a deep appreciation of, even if it's not as SkillUp said, a game for me. Free to play, doable, yeah. Vice, if you're interested in his take on EA, I would suggest that you have a look at SkillUp's video on I'm just going to look this up. Here it is. The Wilson loot box, where he takes down EA and its CEO. It's a fantastic video. This man does not love pay to win. Okay, continuing.
Fast forward to last year, I started my YouTube channel, and eventually, because I'm a huge Destiny fan, I started covering Destiny. As soon as I started putting out Destiny videos on my channel, I began to notice a consistent comment coming through on every single one of those Destiny videos, always from different people and always upvoted by many others. It read, "Just play Warframe, it's better and it's free." I'm no stranger to sectarian disagreements in YouTube comment sections, so I didn't really pay much attention to that comment at the time. But as the hype for Destiny 2 began to build and I began to see this comment more and more with more and more upvotes every time, I began to notice it. It was as though the popularity of the game was building, even though no one in the mainstream gaming press was talking about it. I began to do some digging around. In the brief research that I did, I learned that Warframe had received over 21 major content updates in that time, as well as literally hundreds of smaller bug fixes and changes along the way. Almost every part of the game has been rebuilt or changed in some way over that time, so clearly there was a developer who cared a lot about their game, and a player base large enough to sustain it. I learned that over 23 million people had downloaded this game since its launch, which was a number comparable to something of that like Destiny, and a few million shy of Overwatch's 30 million. I looked at Steam charts and I was stunned to learn that Warframe was actually consistently one of the top 10 most played games on Steam, which to me was just crazy. At the time of writing this review, more people were playing Warframe on PC than were playing GTA 5. Where Tom Clancy's The Division, which is another game I cover, had 3,000 people playing at that time, Warframe had 40,000. Clearly something was going on here and I was missing out on it. I downloaded it and installed it and got going, and immediately I could see how greatly improved the game was from when I first played it. There was now a proper introductory area. The game's visuals had been overhauled, and when I made it to the star map, I could see just how much map there was to cover. The game was now huge, and I can tell you that I'm now about 70 hours into Warframe, and I've only really progressed through about half of the star map, and I've only really utilized about 10% of the available weapons and armor. Even in those opening few hours of the game, I thought I was wrapping my head around how much content there was to enjoy, but the truth was I wasn't even scratching the surface. There is just so much game here, to the point where I'm literally stunned that a developer only 170 people strong has taken this product that I originally played and made it into this game that now exists in the space of only 4 years. It's staggering how much game there is here, and even more staggering to know that all of it is free if you want it to be. But of course, we can't see and appreciate that bigger picture if we don't understand the basics. So let's spend some time understanding what sort of game Warframe is, so that you'll know whether or not it's something for you.
Digital Extremes is doing it right. Yeah. They're doing a lot of things right with this game. It's still remarkable to me how low it seems to fly under the radar, despite its success. I love the weird
so the biggest
art
question
and aesthetic.
you probably have at this point is, what the hell kind of game is Warframe? And I totally get you, because that was me 2 weeks ago. I don't think I was really able to answer that question either until I was about 20 or 30 hours into the game. Warframe is so weird looking to watch that it can be almost impossible to get a sense of what it is from the outside looking in. So I'm going to spend a moment answering that question in a lot of detail. So let's break it down. Firstly, Warframe is a third-person game. It's exclusively third-person, there is no first-person option, and you really wouldn't want one anyway with a game like this. It's an action game, it's not an RTS or a strategy or a puzzle game or whatever else, the focus here is on constant action. Many people will call it a shooter, but it's not fair to call it a shooter, since there's actually a huge focus on melee combat as well. So there's plenty of shooting if you want there to be, but there's actually plenty of swords and nunchucks and bow staves and all sorts of other melee things if that's your thing. It's entirely up to you how you play. It is a mission-based game, it's not open world, and there's no focus on exploration yet.
As the point of this recording, there are several open worlds in Warframe. This has changed a lot in 4 years.
But we'll come back to that later. Its maps are all procedurally generated. It has a number of set tiles that it combines in different ways, so that almost no two missions are the same. You'll absolutely see familiar areas, but they'll be connected to each other in different ways to always keep things fresh. It's not a story-driven game. It has some rich lore behind it and some really great story-driven quests, but you are not playing this game for the story. You are playing it for the mechanics and for the loot grind. It is an extremely dense and complex RPG. There are an infinite number of build options available to you that allow you to play through the game in whatever playstyle pleases you. It can be played solo very easily, though more complex activities do require a group. And yes, thankfully, there is auto matchmaking for almost all activities. There are no raids like in Destiny or World of Warcraft. The game's endgame does have larger encounters with more players involved, however these are just amped up versions of the same horde style encounters that you're typically facing. There are bosses to kill on regular missions, but they're more like killing a boss in Diablo than they are killing a raid boss in Destiny. It's a looter, but its loot economy is different than what you might expect because of the fact that it's a free to play game. For this reason, you're really looking to grind out as many materials as possible so that you can craft new warframes, weapons, and other items rather than receive those items as drops as you would in other looter games. And yes, it is a free-to-play game. You don't need to spend money to play it, but not spending money means you're going to have to invest a hell of a lot of time into the game to get the same as those that do spend money. This is a really complex topic and I don't want to gloss over it, so we'll come back to this one soon. Finally, it does have a PvP component, but it's absolutely not the focus of this game. It's totally separate from the PvE experience in any way, it has no impact on PvE balancing, and it's really not embraced by the community as a core part of the experience. People will generally tell you that if you're playing Warframe for PvP, then you're probably playing the wrong game. For that reason, I'm not going to be discussing the PvP side of this game in this review. If I was going to be really basic in my description, I'd
This is where he drives it home. So before he gets there, I'm just gonna dig into what you just said, Vice. Dude, it is very cool that you got your significant other to play a video game with you, especially a game like this. I've only had one experience in my life like that where I persuaded my wife to play Guild Wars 2 with me back in 2015. And it's kind of a crazy experience to share a game world with someone you love that way. If you like social gaming, it's one of the most unique experiences you can have. There's definitely frustrations and along the way, but man, the payoffs are so fun. That's really cool. You got to experience that with Warframe. 3 open worlds, I think, are the Plains of Eidolon. So just to catch people up, since this was made, Warframe has put an expansion out called Plains of Eidolon. Another one called Fortuna. And another one whose name is escaping me. It's on a volcanic moon. Deimos. Yes. So those are the 3 open worlds I was thinking about. They've also added a mode into the game where you can get into spaceships and do some ship-to-ship stuff. I haven't played the game since it was introduced. I loved Warframe. Decided in the end it wasn't a game for me. I'm not really here to talk about Warframe, even though I definitely could. But to me, what SkillUp is about to say in the next minute of this video told me what I needed to know to reconcile his differences of opinion on Doom Eternal's Marauder and Outriders from that of Under the Mayo, and his challenge-focused approach to what he likes out of games. So have a listen to this. This is important.
I'd say that Warframe is the closest thing to third-person Diablo that you're ever going to find. Where Destiny and The Division and Borderlands have elements that make them looters, none of them deliver the same unbridled power and unrelenting loot grind that Diablo does. Diablo is never hard, and neither is Warframe. It's about choosing the right difficulty for you so that you can grind content at a comfortable pace, allowing you to collect loot and use builds that you find interesting. And this is the key point here. Like any other looter, Warframe is ultimately about doing the same thing again and again and again and again.
Power, comfort, grind, build. Those 4 words, I think, are insanely important to understanding Skill Up's perspective on any game he plays. He has this really, really competent way of being able to see what other people like in games and speak towards those things. But I think for him, this is the core of it.
You are always on some procedurally generated map killing waves of aliens. That's it. But the way you choose to do that differs depending on what you choose to bring to the table. In this way, Warframe is absolutely not for everyone. So many people will hate Warframe and games like it because they hate the repetitiveness that is core to any looter. So if you're going to decide whether or not Warframe is for you, you definitely need to accept what it is, because that is not going to change at any point over your Warframe journey. But I don't want to sell it short, because the truth is I've played almost every looter ever released, and I gotta tell you, I've never played a game like Warframe before. So now I want to talk about what makes Warframe so special, and explain how this free-to-play game from a little-known developer has risen to go toe-to-toe with some of the best AAA games on the market today.
Whew. Okay. So let's tie this beautiful discussion up. Again, this is a recapturing of an experience that I had over the weekend. As someone who was already a fan of Under the Mayo, already a fan of Skill Up, saw this video by Under the Mayo that took the piss out of Outriders and disagreed at a seemingly fundamental level about what you should care about in it compared to this gentleman Skilled Up. And it set me down this path of understanding how they can disagree so hard. And their disagreement is not a contentious one. Like, they're not pissed off at each other. And I'm not trying to pit these guys as enemies, because I don't think they are. If anything, they all just add to the overall quality of conversation that's happening in gaming. But it bothered me that I couldn't reconcile these things. After going down this path, here's what I see. Under the Mayo is a person who likes personal challenge, who likes systems that are driven by challenge, that is presented to him by the world. He wants a difficult problem to solve and a rewarding payoff for solving that problem within a game world. Something he can patiently master over time. Skill Up seems like a guy who wants to feel powerful, to have the ability to comfortably grind and build and customize his experience. Mayo doesn't care about power fantasy or grinding. Doesn't seemingly care about the comfort of the experience. Whereas Skill Up doesn't seem to be really driven by a game that pounds him into the dirt and incentivizes him to get good And to him, an experience that is interrupted by a spike in difficulty, like the Marauder, seems like a flaw, and that's how he presents it. And for Mayo, seeing a game like Outriders that doesn't present him an interesting challenge to learn to overcome seems like an apology to lazy gamers and like a bad game. And those explanations, to me, make sense and to me create a deeper level of connection with both of these creators. And these are conclusions I've drawn for myself. Actually, I shouldn't call them conclusions. I should call them hypotheses. Because the truth is, these guys haven't said these things out directly. This is just me connecting the dots of the unreliable narration that is in the world around us. And in this particular case, between two creators who I respect, disagreeing about games that are in the zeitgeist of gaming conversation. Never saw the Mayo video, but he should try Final Fantasy XIV. Mayo doesn't play multiplayer games. If I ever talk to him, I'd like to ask him why. So, the last piece of this puzzle is, what does this mean to me? Because I'd be lying to you if I didn't tell you that I had a personal incentive in resolving this conflict, which really mainly exists inside my own head. I mentioned at the start of this video that Skill Up successfully persuaded me to play Warframe, and he did. I played that game for like 150, 200 hours before I decided that at the end it wasn't for me, because I don't really care that much about power fantasy or loot grind. I actually am a little more with Mayo on looking for a challenge from my games. Another layer for me is that I care a great deal about socialization in games and multiplayer, and I really love games that make me connect with people. And Warframe has multiplayer capability, but in much the same way that Mayo would present it, Warframe does not push you into connecting with people, and so communities don't really form in the way that I find interesting and rewarding. Now, and Skill Up also persuaded me to play another game, Destiny 2. One of the videos I had queued up but didn't end up showing because I don't think it's necessary, which I highly recommend you watch if you like good videos on games, is his video about Destiny 2 Forsaken, the Forsaken expansion for Destiny 2. It is, I think, a piece in my mind, kind of like the Challenge Matters video. It is kind of like a piece of YouTube gaming history. And he talks about how Bungie turned around a game that seemed like it was too big to change in many ways with Forsaken. And I agree. And he inspired me to pick that game up and try it. And I played Destiny 2 for about 250 hours over the course of the Forsaken and then the Beyond Light expansions. And again, I stopped playing that game for a similar reason. The way the game was designed, it did not push me into engaging with communities. And I don't care about grinding or power fantasy, which that game also does well. So, by understanding this, I've understood actually why, a better understanding of why I bounced off of Destiny and Warframe. Like, that understanding I just reflected to you, I didn't have in my head in a way that I could say it to you until I went down this path. And to me, that reinforces some ideas that I have about myself, about what my personality is and what I like. And that helps me make better decisions about what games to play and what kind of things to engage with. Because let's be honest, guys, there are so few hours in the day compared to the opportunities we have to engage in gaming experiences. Vice says, Warframe's challenging side is literally just staying in the same mission for 10 hours for 1,000+ level mobs. Right. The grind. A new reflection. Sorry, another reflection is on Doom Eternal. I felt guilty about not finishing Doom Eternal because it is a game that is really cool looking and interesting. And to me, a core understanding about myself in games is that I like arcade style games that are demanding and movement heavy, which Doom Eternal checks all those boxes. And after watching Mayo talk about it, and after seeing SkillUp's reflections about it, I have a better understanding of the reason that I don't care about Doom, which is because it doesn't push me into having community forming social interactions. This is why I'm obsessed with the game Planet side. Like, that's the experience I care about with games, and that's part of why I'm on here talking to y'all. I could see myself playing any one of those games because they're all amazing games. If there ever comes a time where I can find an interesting social payoff for engaging with them. And maybe at some point streaming them will be what that is, but I don't know about that. And what I want to suggest, and what I want to reflect on, is the amount of value that I feel in allowing both of these opinions that disagree with each other to live in my consciousness without denying one or the other long enough to gain a better understanding of my fellow man and of myself. And I think that is a process that I just really want to highlight and understand. And by sitting down here and walking through it, not only will I hope you all find this interesting, but this actually helps me out a lot to sit down and formalize my thoughts. One of the ideas I had for the show today was actually to talk about my understanding of ADHD, which is something that I was diagnosed with last year. And my understanding of that disorder has changed my life in a lot of really beneficial ways. But I think that, and I actually just forgot why I brought up that anecdote. It shows you, proves that I have ADHD. Also that I'm a little tired. This show started a little later than usual because usually I plan these out the night before. But today I came into this not knowing what I was going to do. Maybe even thinking about canceling. But I went out for a walk, which is one of those great self-care things that I do. And when I was out on the walk, all this slotted in for me. The Mayo video, the SkillUp video, the Doom, the Outriders, how it all connected, and how it all, for me, adds up to a valuable process that I would love to see happen more in the game communities that I fucking love. Vice, I have ADHD too. Yeah, I will eventually do some content about that. I need to prepare for it a little more. I think that gaming is one of the great attractors, especially for young men who have ADHD, and especially for those who don't have it diagnosed. There are a lot of good reasons for it. I've learned a lot about it. But yeah, anyway, I hope y'all enjoyed this exploration. That's the show. I'm realizing as time goes on that these are essentially video essays that I don't have the time to produce in a lot of ways. And I hope that everyone enjoys. In a way, I could actually, rather than showing up on stream, I could just sit in my apartment and make these into YouTube videos. I would do fewer of them because it takes a lot longer to make a video than it does to get ready for a stream. Hey, Kai. Yeah, I'm wrapping up now. We just finished up. But I love this format because it gives me an excuse to talk to you guys. I care about what y'all think. And for me, the social problem solving is intrinsic to this whole thing. Kai, I heard you're doing speedrunners. Yes. We are working out the scheduling, but I think me and Kamikaze78 are on the same page as Shockter. We're going to have a show match between me and Kamikaze78 doing a speed run in Planet Side 2 to see who could frag out harder. I have no idea how good Kamikaze is at the game. I'm a little worried. Lanzer, good to hear. It's a soundboard for yourself. You find yourself pausing while listening to talk through your own reactions. Yeah, that's exactly the process I go through when watching these videos and other people whose opinions I find interesting. Absolutely, man. Kemi's a YouTuber? Yeah. In any case, I'm excited about that. I'm guessing it's going to happen this upcoming weekend. As soon as I know when it's going to happen, I will let you guys know about it. Probably on Twitter. You work this weekend? Well, I don't know. It might not be. It's interesting because with the Sirius and Rel match, both those guys are on the West Coast, so scheduling is pretty easy. But Kami lives in Australia. He's an Aussie. And so he is, I think, 18 hours ahead of me. So my Friday night would be his Saturday afternoon. And so probably it will be either Friday or Saturday night my time. But we'll see. Vice, that match was great. You fell asleep real fast. Yeah, the Rel Sirius match was fun. But it really, I think, showed off how the format needs high-end fraggers to make it fun to watch. I'm really worried that neither of us are going to be able to pull a fast enough KPM to keep people interested. As much as I want the match to be close, I would much rather it be a stomp one way or the other that is not too slow than have it be a close endurance match. Kai, the format's fun for memes and personalities. Yeah, true. Yeah, no, maybe I'm wrong. Maybe a slow burn close match would be fun to watch. Planet Side is so random. Yeah. Yeah, one thing that I thought might have been fun for Shocker to think about with the show matches is actually to play is actually to unmute the Discord and let the people who are in the match actually join in on the entertainment. I can see why you wouldn't want to do that because they're concentrating on fragging, but I thought it might be kind of interesting. Kai's got to go into it with the mindset of having fun rather than comparing yourself to the serious guys. Yeah. Although I will say I am trying to participate in the competition in the spirit of competitiveness, and I am trying to shore up some of the holes in my game, such as I want to be sure I can at least be comfortable with a basic heavy assault build for all three factions, which currently I'm not. Because as much as I love my light assaults, and it is my number one preference, there will be fights that I can do nothing with light assault from time to time. It'd be great to hear two players talk, but Shocker is so loud and also has to entertain the stream. Yeah, you're probably right. Probably it would be disruptive. Can't wait for the round when you need to play something other than light assault. Yeah, I've been practicing heavy a little bit the last couple nights offline. I will be probably streaming a bit of PlanetSide this week as I keep my skills sharp. So watch out for that. Other than that, yeah, that and speedrunners, and still working to get some more interviews scheduled. More to come on that. You want to hear Deeg have an in-depth discussion with Kami while they compete. Maybe we'll do like a post-mortem, like after the fact. There might be some content I can do on my channel or Kami's even, whatever. It's a cool format. Maybe even me and interesting. I'm getting ideas. Y'all are keeping me around. You know, this stream tonight was almost me just playing PlanetSide and talking to you guys. Because I didn't think I was going to have an idea. You enjoy stuff like this? You mean like the kind of pseudo podcast content that we're doing here? I'm really pleased. I didn't know if there was going to be any overlap between people who found me via PlanetSide and people who found me via other means. You know, in my experience doing this, you don't need a lot of people to be engaged with your content in order to make it feel worthwhile. Even just a handful of people watching and a couple who are chatting can make it feel. For me, it really ticks the boxes that I need it of being a social experience, which is where I get most of them these days. Okay, I gotta cut bait and find some food and call it a night here. Otherwise, tomorrow's gonna suck. But I want to thank y'all for being a part of this discussion or for lurking, if that is your want, whatever the case is. This has been fun, and I love turning out for you guys. So a little bit of self-promotion. This video will be up on YouTube, of course. You can find me there. This is streamed live on Twitch on Monday nights for those who are watching after the fact. Links are will be in the description. I also have a Patreon. Little known fact. Not a lot there, but if you want to throw me a few bucks, that's a good way to do it. And if not, what I really care about is people enjoying the content. So please, that's my number one. And I tweet from time to time. So if you want to hear my random thoughts about the world and things going on in gaming, you can check that out. And that'll do it. Yeah, Vice, I will definitely watch out for you. So to everyone, thank you. From one unreliable narrator to another. Have a good night.